Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast and our very first roundtable. I'd like to welcome our guests. We had a couple from Season 1, Jesus Vasquez and Matt Johnson. And then from Season 2, Race Liberante. Join us again, our very first roundtable, giving this thing a go. Sharing a mic here with Dirk because, well, I've only got 4 ports on the recording, so we'll have to bump things up with the budget at some point. We're actually going to try to cover a bunch of different topics and things like that with this roundtable. Just off the top of our heads, and then also actual scripted stuff where we have some different ideas. Unlike the other FCP episodes that we've done before, where it's like you guys, we dig into your guys' lives and your connection with the karting and your origin stories. This is going to be more about just stuff that we're thinking about. So really, anything is on the table. We just BS about it and see what we think. And as it is the beginning of the karting season, we're just kind of getting things underway. The first thing I kind of want to bring up there was kind of your guys' approach. You get different points of views, right? I mean, you're driver coach, driver yourself, and you do a little bit of the team management, that kind of stuff with Nash Motorsports. Obviously, Jesus, you got the Munchkin, who actually is running with Nash, but the P1 engines and the motor building thing is the big deal there. And obviously, Race Factory with you, Race, it's you getting a chance to do everything under the sun as a team owner, as now a brand, and also as a driver. So you guys all have different point of views and thought processes. And first thing I want to kind of bring out to you guys was, as you're wherever you're coming from on that deal, how do you guys prep as we go out from the off season and you go into the new season? How do you approach that from your guys' different point of view, whether that be, trying to find sponsors or, make sure you have enough customers or anything like that, or like as a driver, trying to find those sponsors or any of that kind of stuff? I mean, maybe Matt, if you want to jump on there, or really anybody.
I think, everybody's got a different routine and a different program, but for a lot of us, you take that time to reset a bit. Maybe as drivers, we eat a little bit more than we do during the season, and we rest a little more.
Like you said, they're right as you're looking.
Yeah. And mess around a little bit on the sim and things you just don't quite have time to do when you're racing almost every single weekend. And then at the same time, depending on how involved you are with your program, you have time to sort of revamp, update, whether it be with your equipment, your tooling, etc. Maybe it's something that you're particularly working on. So, I mean, I think for everybody it's different. Me, at this point in my career, I take more time to eat and hang out.
That's definitely been one of the hardest things though in the off season. And I just told Mike a week ago, because we just had our first arrive and drive race this last weekend. And I'm like, it'll be nice to get back to a schedule, have, a rhyme and reason to why we're doing stuff again, whatever. But yeah, that's always been kind of the toughest part of the off season, is having a timeline, because the days are just kind of passing with not having an event each weekend to look forward to or anything to prep for.
Sure, because most of the year, and reality is most of the year, and in life in general, it's like all you're doing is looking forward, right? Like, what's next? Oh, I got this place to go to next weekend. Oh, in 2 weeks I got to be here. In 3 weeks we got this, and in 4 weeks we got that. And you really don't have much time to really, like I said, chill, or even for that matter, look back and reflect or anything else. So you also get that opportunity to do that in the off season as well. Some of us, like I said, guys like Jesus will do little updates and whatnot to their shops, update their tooling, stuff like that. I'm sure that's something that he can probably go into for you as well.
Yeah, he's on the engine builder side of things. Especially, it seems like the things have been fairly static as far as rule changes and that kind of stuff goes. I mean, are you just like kind of hit reset button? All right, what do I got for inventory? What do I got for customers? Like, what's your kind of take on season ends? I mean, it does not take long for the next season to start up.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's really not much of a downtime. I mean, our downtime is the 2 weeks that we had for Christmas and New Year's, where I really this year kind of zoned out.
Especially with Supernats being the first week of December this year, right?
But I had guys, I mean, it as far as there's really not much of an off season. I mean, I have guys going to Daytona. And
right,
then,
WKA,
that's between Christmas and New Year's. You were out there. Mm-hmm. I had some guys out there. So that was like, come back from Supernats, start turning that stuff around. We had the 2 weeks, which was Christmas, New Year's, and then the Winter Series last weekend. And then we have Rock this weekend. So everything there's really not a whole lot. I mean, what we do, a lot of what I try to do is kind of clean out the shop, right? There's like a lot of stuff, we throw out and just kind of reorganize. Some new equipments come in, just kind of get that sorted out. But that's pretty much it.
Well, I think that's the toughest part on the motor building side. And I don't build them, but I mean, looking at your social media and stuff like that, and knowing how you are out here at the track, I mean, it's a constant business. And like you just said, you had WKA guys, all the East Coast stuff still going on through the holidays, all the big events. So when the club racing died, Super Nats was done. There was plenty more to keep going. So I think outside looking in, that does seem like one of the tougher parts compared to a team is the team does have a proper off season at a point where you can just keep going because of testing, other events, so on and so forth.
I mean, honestly, we stay pretty busy. There's a big group from like the East Coast that send in their downtime is this time, the last month of the year and the first month of the year. So we have a lot of stuff that's in there during their downtime. They send it in, getting it ready, things like that.
And you talked about a team having a little more downtime. I think that's a nice segue to ask Race. I mean, you've obviously got not just the team, but chassis development, things like that. But on the team side of things, if you were to try to compartmentalize that a little bit, do you really feel like it's a little bit easier doing? I mean, you're also doing a bit of engine stuff, are you not, in-house? Or you were playing around with that in the early days, but maybe not so much anymore?
That was more like a passion project I started doing that stuff myself just for me, just because I enjoyed it.
So now it's the team and the brand at this point.
Yeah, the engine stuff. Literally the only thing I touch anymore is 206 for our local guys at Pitt, and then I still do road tax stuff after being with J3 for so long. And but other than that, it's even the team thing. Like I got my 2 or 3, 4 factory kids that I sponsor and help out, and we were out here today testing and new materials and stuff like that. But as far as the team goes, I personally am different than maybe some of these other guys that, I don't do the Florida Winter Series. Maybe that's some time for me to go race. I try to take a little bit more time off. I enjoyed, growing up, we always had an off season out here. We took 3 months off. And I enjoy that time. I gives me time to reflect, look back, go through my notes for the year and just kind of figure out what I need to do better the next year. And as I've gotten older, I've tried to be as patient as possible, not have to rush everything. Cause usually when any of us rush something, it doesn't quite go as planned. So, this year, especially, I took that time to take a step back. We're testing a lot of new materials. So I took a 15-day trip out here. We've tested for the last 8 days straight at different tracks across Southern California because the weather's obviously nice. So, I take a little bit of a different approach. The off season for me is my time to start developing new product, and just try and keep innovating and moving forward as much as possible from where the notes said we fell short a couple times last year.
It does. It absolutely seems like no matter if you're just a driver predominantly or engine builder or team, what have you, there's got to be a decompress in there someplace. So you've been going balls to the wall since January from the previous year, what have you. Well, not really Matt. He just kind of kicks up and doesn't really.
Matt just kind of shows up.
Yeah, and wins.
He's there
instantly.
He's that good.
Gets second a lot. The
damn
True story.
rough.
and I get third a lot.
Somebody's got to be the bridesmaid.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at it.
All joking aside, that decompress, I get a chance to reflect and make adjustments for the new year. When you're making those adjustments and you're trying to look at what it is you're going to do, whether that's trying to find new customers or build your schedule, how do you approach the new season? Do you kind of go carbon copy from the previous year as a baseline, and then do I want to change what series I go to? I know Maddie and I have had that conversation back and forth about what are you going to run this year? What are you going to do? Or what do you think you want to do? And there's going to be some that are maybe a staple, right? Super Nats for Maddie or whatnot. And I know I would like to try to go do certain events, but when you guys are looking at the calendar and Jesus says having your munchkin go out there and race, how do you guys pick and choose, A, how much money you want to spend on those things, but B, whatever the priority is for your own particular program? What kind of goes into play for those things? Maybe Race, you can jump in.
I think a lot of it's, realizing what your program brings to the table and dictating it that way. So, if you're a regional team or, a national level team like Nash Motorsports, they, for them, they got to go to all the biggest stuff. And for guys, for me, our marketing is best set at the local and regional level. Because that's where we sell product. So we don't, it's everybody wants a free ride at the Pro Tour. So, yes, we'll go and we'll participate in those bigger events with our drivers that we help out, but I don't go there and expect to get customers out of that. So a lot of my time set at local and regional tracks. I do a lot of traveling to different dealers that we have across the country to help them at their regional and local races. So maybe my input on that's a little different than most, but for me personally, what dictates my schedule for our team per year is honestly who's doing the best job. as a series. So if I'm gonna be spending my money at a series, I'm gonna go somewhere that is putting on a good show and has good staff and a good officials and rules and structure to it and consistency. So I kind of base that off of my past experiences, kind of what's going on in the sport right now, the changes that some of the different series make month to month or year to year, and dictate it that way. And then, honestly, especially for a brand, our big thing is not so much the go-karts as much as is our lifestyle brand and branding, and strategizing that with, honestly, for us, we go to the places that do the most branding and, help push the sport and help push the brand and do a better marketing job. So that's honestly what dictates where I go. But yeah, I know everybody's got, some guys are performance based. I'm more or less on a branding side.
Do you think there's a compromise that you have with your drivers? Like, hey, this is what I think we should do, or do you kind of get some feedback from the guys as far as what your team drivers want to do, or like how does that go along?
Yeah, we kind of go, a lot of it's too set on, obviously we have the Rock and the IAME platform. Those are the two biggest in the country. And then obviously we also have Rotax that's starting to build something again. So for us too, I have to honestly sit back and reflect and go, okay, what's our motor program look like and where are we best set? And right now, for our mini stuff, our Rock stuff's stellar. And we're really proud of that. But some of our IAME stuff struggled, and I've made a transition for the business that we're focused a lot more on KA. You see me in the KA more often, so developing product, and I'm never on the same go-kart any weekend. We're always trying something. So figuring out kind of what lane you fit in and where your stuff's going to do the best is kind of up to, that's the decision we end up making. So where, we feel that we're going to have the best shot with what we have and the development we've done through the little bit of an off season we have or throughout the year is kind of what sets that schedule. And then, like I said, I'm not huge on bringing customers to the big races every weekend. That's not what I do. I'm focused on my kids that I put out there to showcase our product. And, that just comes down to what we have best prepared.
Yeah, I'd be curious a little bit more about the branding versus the, maybe try to the traditional team aspect where you've got, temp fees and you're providing services and stuff like that. Maybe we can circle back on that one. I mean, Jesus with having the kid running, he had Race had talked about having the recognition, having the branding, like having a series it's run well, it's run consistently, but again, having that recognition, like it means something to go win this thing, that
Sure.
kind of deal as far as the top level is concerned. Certainly you can try to make more of the money or whatever, the club or regional, but for a driver who's on the up and coming route, and as we know, you've always kind of let the kid do what he wants to do as far as the direction. If he wants to go racing, he can go racing. If he doesn't, it's not like you're shoved him into the seat. But how do you, as a father, aside from the P1 engines deal, kind of steer that a little bit, and how do you decide to go the directions that you go?
Well, I mean, I've been steering him from the beginning, and I've always said that, I look back at when I raced. I've been in the sport since 96, and I've seen a lot of drivers progress. Some guys are in it for 5-6 years, and they really don't go anywhere, and you kind of see what they do and what they, and then you see the ones that kind of like, man, these guys are racers. They become good. And you kind of look back at how they did it, and I try to learn, right? And so I've been doing it for so long, and what I've noticed is, and I said it before, a lot of the kids nowadays, they try to come in and they want to go right to the top. Daddy's got the money, and there's really, we don't have anything to stop them. If the shop turns them down, they just go to the next shop. So one thing I did with my son is, and I try to tell a lot of the parents, if you want to enjoy this and do it for the long haul and eventually have a kid that can go and win some of these big races, at least my opinion, is you got to go through the steps. And with Buddy, we did that. His very first championship was SoCal Chill Challenge against 3 kids. And that day when he won that championship, I didn't think too much of it. I was like, I didn't even think we had to run the last race. But to my son, it was like, hey, Dad, I'm going to win my first championship today. And I was like, yeah. And then we went to Tri-C and we won the championship, and then we were doing sometimes LAKC, Tri-C at the same time. If you look back at him, I kept him at a pro kart even early on, right? I said, hey, if you're not winning at LAKC or Tri-C, We don't need to go over there. So a lot of what I did with him, and that even now kind of starts to dictate on where we race. So now I feel like we have the LAKC, the Tri-C stuff under his belt pretty solid, in the cadet and the junior. The pro kart stuff, is kind of, I feel good about that. We kind of put that now. This last year was our first year at Pro Tour and really racing the 2 Vegas races. And he's kind of made, now I feel ready for that for him. So that kind of is what dictates that. So this year, and some of it is a business schedule. Some of these like Winter Series races, they just came too soon. I mean, they're just like now. And
Didn't have enough time to decompress.
no, and this year we're moving him to X30. So that's something new for him. I mean, he's raced it, but we don't have a strong X30 program out here because, as you know, it's not a popular
100cc
class.
really,
right. So with on the business side is just developing that engine a little bit more. I didn't feel comfortable putting him out there and doing my testing at the race.
Yeah, so for you, what you're basically saying is you go into the next season going, what's kind of the next step for Junior? What's he really at?
And the money, I mean, it becomes a value, like Race was saying. I mean, where for me as a dad, it's like, well, where do I get my value? And so I really feel out of most of the races, it's about Pro Tour and USPKS where a national level racer gets their value, I feel.
And why is that? And maybe you can speak more to like the recognition, the branding that Race is talking about too. What is that kind of has that marquee?
Number one, it's the tracks. I mean, you're going like Pro Tour, you're going to NOLA. It's a beautiful place. You go to Utah, which is another beautiful track. You go to Indiana, which is another well-known track. The track time, they're longer tracks. It just feels like you get more racing under your belt, as opposed to like a regional program like Pro Kart. It's a Saturday, Sunday deal, kind of like really quick.
So you like the feel of more of an event. You've been there for a few days kind of scenario.
Yes.
It's just a pro. I mean, those two are pro. That's it. That's
Yeah,
where pros go.
I think that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, like Jesus said, some of us, we come, we see, we conquer, and we go, and you don't see us again. Or some of us are lifers like myself and guys like Billy. And some go all the way to the top. It's all different for everybody. But the point is, what's in it for you? What's the value? For me, I just want to race against the best guys at the biggest show and win,
Sure.
obviously, right? So it's obviously different for everybody as an individual. And like Race said, I mean, those are the prestige events to go run and try and, get your name at the top of that list.
3 to 4 day event,
And with the right competition,
like
stuff
the
like that.
Supernats and the Rock, in my opinion, they're too long.
That's
With
once
the-
a year.
with the practice.
It
and
is
stuff like
once
that.
a year. It's a huge event, but it's those events on the business side and even on the racer side, they're too long.
Do you trim a practice day? That's what you're thinking. Do a practice day and then go on from there.
As a racer, for instance, like my son this year at the Supernats, we had a good outing. It's too long an event to go out there and then we're like dead on the second lap. And I knew that stuff can happen. I know you can. That your engine doesn't even start on the grid and you're out, right? But I mean, it's a long event.
Well, I mean, haven't raced it, but watched a few, and Mike haven't raced it. Him and I are going back and forth. The amount of practice days that the bigger events do give, it always kind of surprises me because him and I are on the same opinion where if you show up to that event, you got to be ready to go and you got to be ready to figure out the track quick. Now, that's just as far as figuring out the track, but I mean, granted, whether it's a practice day or a race day, your setups are constantly changing. Not constantly changing, but they're going to change a little bit from session to session, I would imagine. Do you guys think that you could shorten a practice day or just get rid of a practice day on those, pro tours, Vegas races, whatever, and not hurt the event?
Like Jesus says, the Pro Tours and the even the Winter Series stuff, they all are, 3-4 day events, maybe a total of 5 for the primary guys on the team that are involved with the infrastructure and stuff like that in terms of getting ready. But those are just long enough, right? But with Vegas, I mean, you got to get there like the Saturday, the Sunday before, especially if you're part of that initial infrastructure. So, and even the event in itself, really, you can't, I don't know if there's room to cut practices because the reality is like this year we only got 6 to begin with, 4 on one day and 2 the next, and then straight into quali. What I think Jesus is saying, and it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a it's a very long event. It's drawn out. So it's like I said before, it's like you get through the first day of practice and you're like, okay, I got to get into the fast group. I'm in there. Okay, now I can breathe. Now the next day we got to qualify and get in the good group, or, secure a good starting spot for these next 3 heats over 2-3 days. And then you can breathe after that. And then if your heats go okay or not, obviously you're trying to make sure you're in the show and not in the LCQ. So it's an emotionally draining event, and on both sides, right? If you do everything right, like in my deal, Renato Jader did all the right things, and then on the last day you finished 5th, right? Or for that matter, you get drop kick in turn 1. That sucks. Now, on the other hand, for the guy that either has a tough go at the beginning or does everything right and makes it all the way through and conquers, it's all the more rewarding, right? But at the same time, there's 2 sides of that again as well. You have the competitor side, which for me, like I just explained, both ends of it, that's the thrill of victory, agony of defeat. There's nothing better when it comes to, a sportsman type deal. But on the business end, I sure as hell don't want to close my doors on Friday and not work all week and do nothing but spend. And then, of course, if you're a business and you got rentals and whatever going on during the week, you're recuperating. But it's not, the logistics and everything involved are tough. So I get his side of it too.
Well, I think another big part too is you're talking about just the at track time, and I think all 3 of you guys can agree it's not just the at track. It's not even getting to the days of testing that all the teams do, but the amount of prep at the shop that you take the few weeks before to lead up to that.
Let's not even start with that.
Because you're talking about it being a long event, Jesus, and it's like the event is long for sure, but man, the lead up to it,
As Jesus got more involved with it and it started costing real money, it's like you just start to break it down. You start looking at the amount of laps, race laps, to what it costs you or per day. You break it down. I have it somewhere. And the ones that had the best meat were the Pro Tour type events. The 3 with the practice day, you're getting the amount of seat time, race time, and what you were spending was the best.
Yeah, and I suppose if you look at it as far as the event on the whole and what you get for it, you still got to, let's say you got to get there and get back. That's going to happen regardless of what the event is. The hotels is going to be per day, that kinds of stuff. Obviously, it's going to be more in Vegas, that kinds of stuff.
Yes.
But the quality of the on-track stuff, the quality of the drivers you're going against, the prestige, the branding, all the different things attached to it, it all kind of adds to it's not just about how many laps do I get for my dollar.
Yes.
It's how good those laps are.
It's the best bang for the buck.
Right.
Yeah, and I think too, like what I'm seeing, the common thing between USPKS and Pro Tour is you got 2 chances at life. So Saturday, you got a complete whole race day with the full format.
You're talking about the double round program.
Right. You get 2 rounds in one weekend as opposed to like even rock, right? Which again, everything's good. There's, broken clock is right twice a day. But the point is, rock's thing, for instance, is a little different, and it starts with, qualifying and a heat race or whatever on the first day and whatever the format may be, but it's drawn out, over the course of like 3 days, maybe 4. So it's like what he said, right? Everything starts out great on Thursday. Well, come Sunday, the ride in the truck or the ride in that airplane going back can be long, especially when it's like the wind gets knocked out of your sail in one corner after you've done everything right up to that point.
Yeah, I guess the only thing worse than having a 1 round deal and having it not go well is have a 2 round deal and have it not go well both days.
Well, sure, but
at least you had another shot at it.
Yeah,
hit
it's
the reset
like
button.
You can. I mean, we've all had them, right? I've had it where you get there. Matter of fact, Jesus and I, we were racing with Buddy in Colorado, and I just getting my teeth kicked in for 3 days straight, and finally on Sunday for the final, we figured it out. I actually blew up in the second heat because I drove the thing off the track and into the dirt and searching for power. I had no air filter, so I killed the engine immediately. We had to bolt on something that we never thought we'd run, but we figured it out. And long story short, by the final on Sunday, I was 3rd or something, and it was like bitching, right? But it could, it can go other ways when, it starts out good and ends bad, or starts out bad and stays bad the whole time. I mean,
and is that one of those things where you expect to have it at that high level, the USPKS, the Pro Tours, those kind of big events? Is it something that is lacking from the regional or club level, or is it not expected at those levels, and that's okay?
It shouldn't be expected at the local. You shouldn't expect for instance, like a lapper to get black flag, something that happens at Pro Tour events.
Right.
Really, there shouldn't be lappers at Pro Tour events, but there's different expectations, I think, and that local regional, it's actually kind of weird. We were discussing this actually, 3 days ago when we were here. We were talking about there is no, and he touched on it earlier, there is no gap between the kid that runs LAKC and the kid that goes and runs Pro Tour. And there used to be that gap, like like you said, there's nothing regulating you from taking your kid week 5 in a go-kart to a Pro Tour event.
Some kind of like a licensing system, which I know that Jesus, you had brought up before, as far as an idea, like at least a prerequisite of some kind, whether that be punches or this or that, or something that shows that, yeah, I've actually checked that box before I go line up for the next one.
Yeah, I think to your question earlier, there's expectations for, again, what you spend. When you go to a Pro Tour race, the entry fee is $1,200 or whatever, somewhere around there, versus a Pro Kart race, a Pro Kart Challenge race, which is $400 or $500. So obviously you get fuel and tires and whatever that adds up eventually, but there's also different standards to that. You don't expect, okay, if the race director misses a small call for this or that at a LAKC or a Pro Kart Challenge race, it's okay, whatever. We're regional racing, we're local racing, we're here to learn, we're here to develop. But when you go to the pro show or the pro tours or any of that stuff, you expect it to be, I'm here spending my money, I'm here doing my job, I'm staying here till 10, 11 p.m. at night working on my stuff. I expect the same from the series. Right,
and I guess that's definitely going to be a skew of opinion, right? Because where your guys are coming from, and I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, but then you've got your club level driver that moves up to the regional for the first time and has that same call. He's like, WTF, right? He's getting his first shot at the next level. It's not really him learning as much as going to that next step, that next level. But at the same token, when you compare it to the rung that goes on above that, there's going to be a different level, no matter how you scratch it, of expectation, price tag, and then obviously the value. So we've talked about like when you guys are going into the new season and you're trying to choose what it is that you want to do. You talked about the recognition, the branding. There's the bang for the buck and that kinds of stuff. And like you kind of alluded to as well, like what's my goal? What's my own personal 2 cents, right? When you go in there, when you guys are, one of the things that popped up here in the off season, there wasn't a lot of rule changes and stuff like that were like overarching across all things. Like for instance, in years prior, when Rotax changed to the Evo package, or when a tire has been changed from this brand to another brand, or that, where it's a bigger change, it's a bigger jump for you. Does that adjust your thought process, or as far as what you run, or does that just make it go, all right, we got to test more? And kind of what's your thought process on not just how you would approach it, but also how it's conveyed to you? I guess it's a 2-part question. What are your prerequisites? Like, how would you like to find out that, oh, by the way, we changed the tire, congratulations? Or is like, here's why we did it, those kinds of things. And I guess the easiest thing to bring up for this year would be the pushback bumper thing, which is the most, talked about thing here, certainly in the off season.
Yeah, I was actually on another show talking about that a couple weeks ago, and once they dropped that news, we were talking about what's going to dictate whether this works or doesn't work, and my simple answer was the officials. Because if you're going to take something like that away, something that's been built into the sport worldwide, it's not something we chose to do here, it's something that was pushed in the CIK, and then it was brought over here because it was actually doing an efficient job.
So in general, you were in favor of the move?
To an extent. To an extent, the best thing I can say is because we all grew up racing. We didn't have pushbacks. We didn't even really have bodywork that covered the tires.
Right.
Especially him, and kind of him when he was younger. But we had the metal rear bumper and everything, and there was your own consequences for your actions. And there was a lot more respect on the racetrack. This wasn't, the sport 15, 20 years ago was a completely different sport. It's very blue collar and whatever. Now it's, like he said earlier, daddy's got the money and go write that one off. We'll buy you another one or whatever. So it's just a different mentality now.
And we would jump into the pushbacks in in depth, I think, in just a second. But as far as your approach on a rule change,
Okay.
if you're like, oh, they're not going to do pushbacks anymore, piss on that, I'm not going to do it. Or, all right, I need to get with all my drivers. I need to, guys, it's different now. We need to do this. What's your, and again, driver aspect, dad aspect, like what are your guys' thoughts when you have that rule change? We'll use this as an example, but I definitely want to jump into this a little bit more.
Yeah, I think regardless of a rule change or a tire change, engine change, whatever it may be, it just comes down to off-season testing. If you're going to decide that you want to stick with that program, everybody's affected differently with those situations, right? When they made, maybe the other most recent was the exhaust and intake and ignition change for the X30. That kind of threw a wrench in maybe some guys' plans that, guys like engine builders that had all the data and everything figured out on the X30 program, and then they go off and change that. Maybe that helps you or makes a decision for you to back away from that for a bit to do some development work. Yeah, I guess everybody's different. It's all in preparation, right? So as long as that news is held, it comes out early enough, we all have time to adapt. Even this pushback thing was kind of, I feel like, a little too soon, only because we've been with it so long that, it is a different driving style. You have to have more respect on the racetrack as a competitor, because if you go off there, it's 9 times out of 10, you could move somebody out of the way and get lucky that you don't get a pushback. But now, now even driver coaches have to go about it differently, because if you're going to go tell your kids you just go in there and blast the corner and move somebody out of the way, well, maybe you should tell them too that if you didn't do a good enough job, that dude's going to murder you on the racetrack.
Right. So certainly there's going to be a mentality or a coaching aspect of it, but maybe not a price tag attached to it directly, versus, let's say, like you said, the pipe and things like that, the adjustment to the X30, or for instance, there's been talk of whether or not to have KA and rock together at the same time, right? Like, all right, we're not going to run rocks anymore, or we're not going to run KAs anymore in that particular category. If you are on one side of the fence or the other, you now have to make a decision. Do I buy that engine to go run now that I have this other one that I can't? Or even a little bit further back, not too long ago, do I go get that 175, or do I get the rock? Like, what direction do I go? Those kinds of things. And maybe as an engine builder, like he had mentioned, when you maybe have things figured out on one end, or maybe you don't have those parts or you don't have those things, how does that affect your business? And how do you, again, when you get that news, how do you want to get that news? And do you have any kind of input or thoughts on how that goes moving forward?
On the engine stuff, we're pretty involved with IAME and then the rock guys. So a lot of times we'll get a little wind of something's coming. I mean, with the X30 stuff, we knew a long time ago that stuff was coming. It was just a matter of time when they were going to try to push it through, and COVID kind of messed some of those things up,
right, on
how that was planned. But no, I mean, when changes come, I mean, it's like, if they change the tire, everyone's on the tire. It's not like he gets to stay on the old tires and we're on the new tires. It is, you get out and test it. We have the dyno, and, with Jesus, I can get out and do some engine testing stuff if it's something major. And a lot of times, when they change the fuel, I mean, I went out and tested the fuel and I didn't see a difference. I ran them on the dyno. I'm, really small, nothing to panic about.
So for you guys, so far, it's like as long as you got a chance to test, like, don't spring it on me.
It's just got to be transparent. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Give everybody time. Like, for instance, in IAME's defense, with the new pipe and everything that came out for the X30, this was a plan when Tom signed the deal with IAME. He had a 5-year plan. Nothing will change for 5 years. After that 5 years, yeah, we're going to do what the rest of the world did with that engine, and we're going to go to the updated package. But that was a plan 5 years before that, right? So anybody that has the excuse that we were unprepared, well, you right. You were unprepared. We all weren't. You were. But so as ever, it's transparency, and then it's as simple as adapting and overcoming with testing and everything else that we do to try and do everything we can to better that. As long as that vendor or whoever is supplying those parts and pieces is able to get us that stuff early enough to test, everybody should be okay and happy with that.
I think that's the biggest thing, though, when making big changes like that, either to a motor package, tire, whatever, is the delivery. And to your point, Race, the transparency, like being straight up with us, what's the goal of what you're trying to do, or is where you pushed up against a wall and this is what had to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, some changes have no effect.
Right.
For the most part, a lot of the changes have been for a positive. The tire seemed like, we were trying to get them to last longer and not lose performance. The fuel supposed to be healthier. I do notice a little bit that it's not, at least from the dyno.
I was going to say, you probably spent a little bit of time around that stuff.
Yeah.
More than the average.
Yeah,
builder,
I do see a difference. I mean, they've been, the X30 changes were definitely better. So as long
Just
as they're
part
in
of
that
evolution.
direction,
Well, I think you nailed it too. Is if that's a tire, everyone's going to run it. There may be a lot of bitching and moaning about it, but everyone's going to jump to it.
Yeah,
and if they want to do it, if they don't want to do it, excuse me, they'll go to something else.
You're going to hear it. I mean, the new tire has more grip. Okay. The new tire doesn't have as much grip, or they fall off. It's like, well, all right. You just go in that direction with your setup and you move on. I mean, there's not much more you can do.
I mean, like you said, aside from being forced to make a larger purchase to either stay in or change your game, that would be about it, right?
Yeah.
And that goes back to that engine program.
Well, that's the only time it gets tricky is when somebody like Rotax screwed themselves when they decided that they were going to drop the Evo thing, because it was, it was a weird time anyways with the U.S. importer and the guys that ran the series, but stuff like that, it's just, as long as you, again, transparent, roll it out properly. Even when Tom so many years ago did the X30 only deal, or he was doing trade-in programs and doing it the right way to where it was incentivized to try, do this now, make the switch because we're evolving. We want you to evolve with us. We're willing to take a cut on this if you want to come with us. So good examples. There's a lot of good examples throughout the last 5-6 years of that. Where they've been transparent and actually tried to help you get into a new package.
Yeah, and I think that, again, the only thing I can think of is where you would choose not to go run a series is if it was, I don't know, fundamentally against what you're thinking or something like that. For instance, the 125 to the 175, a big, massive change in how things work. I'm not a shifter driver, so I can't really talk to it too much. I mean, obviously, Race, you've driven just about everything there is out there as far as gear grabbing. But there was definitely I would rather not, I'll go do this instead. There's also the planning department, how you make that happen and having it go smoothly and that kinds of stuff. But it sounds like, again, across the board, as long as there's transparency, as there's being able to plan ahead, there's really no big rule changes are going to happen. It's the same for everybody. We kind of move on from that kind of stuff as far as rule changes stuff, but I do want to now talk about one of the biggest things I think across the board, doesn't matter what class or what we're doing or how long we've been doing it. And that's, I know we've all had our own individual conversations, even on the podcast, driver etiquette. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the pushback stuff. And then the officiating, those kinds of things. Talking about first and foremost, just bringing up the pushback stuff. We talked about how it changed really quick, and that it was a change that was across the board for the winter series. Now I don't know exactly how far that goes. If it's more of a, like it has been in the past, where we'll see if this works and that kinds of stuff. When I first had the pushbacks, it was in the 2019 Super Nats. And I hadn't run it before because I was running 100cc and they didn't require it. It was only at the Pro Tour, I think they were running that year in 19. Yeah. And I remember being scared shitless that I was going to get this penalty on the start. Like, how am I not going to get this thing pushed in? I then drive a little bit longer and realize you actually can make a decent amount of contact and it's not going to push it in too bad. So once I got over all that and put some more time in 20 and 21, wasn't a big deal. However, the big hits or the just completely blasting people out of the way stuff, it at least gave me pause. And I feel like you guys could all speak to whether or not it gave you pause on the starts. And I felt like I wasn't just going to go smash my way through there no matter what. Now, I already don't drive that way. I don't really use the chrome horn. Like, I'm not, even though I started racing about the same time, a little bit different where I was from and how I was brought up, as far as you didn't go get after it and, earn the respect that way.
Why do you look at me and Matt differently when you talk like that?
Because I've raced both of you guys and and heard and that's, everybody's got their own way of how they were brought up. But that all being said, I actually liked the pushback stuff, certainly for cleaning up the starts. Now, what I never agreed with wholeheartedly was how they were enforced and how the penalties applied to them were enforced. I guess that's where we can kind of open things up is pushback or no pushback. If you're going to have them, what you think the penalty should be and those kinds of things.
I think the rule with the pushback was fine. I mean, something like that to try and keep under control has got to be hard. And I think, especially the fact that it was based on what we were doing across the rest of the world in terms of how we officiated it was as good as you can probably make it, right? Because you surely can't take the time to sit there and dispute every single pushback.
Agreed.
Because eventually it's going to become an honor system. There's just not enough time. Every guy could come walking in that office and say, well, this guy stepped on his brakes and this guy did this and this guy did that. And you could sit there and even argue that the drivers should all have GoPros and be able to officiate it that way. But I just think there's too much time involved with that. So
Agreed.
I think is whether you liked it or not, the pushback system was officiated the best that you could possibly, have it. The non-pushback thing, like I said before, I think with the pushback, I've always said it's definitely cleaned up the first lap and the starts quite a bit. For sure. You definitely don't see the meat wagon rolling. I think Tom mentioned that on his podcast or your podcast with him on it. But, at the end of the day, it is going to change the culture a little bit because before the pushback, there was a ton of first lap carnage and turn one carnage, especially if you're outside of those first 3 or 4 rows in the heavy hitter classes. So you become a little more vulnerable. And I think, again, it goes back to that common term, a double-edged sword, right? You have it one way or the other. The coaches are going to obviously have a different, sort of approach in certain situations or with certain drivers. But I think overall, there's going to be consequence with no pushback now, because I can promise you if someone gets into me and they don't got no pushback bumper coming,
they're going to get theirs.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just the way it is. But, who knows? Maybe it'll bring some of the respect back. The pushback thing wasn't bad. Like I said, I think you were able to minimize the first lap stuff, and maybe even some of the other parts of the race were minimized as well because,
Right.
You obviously had that concern of getting a bumper.
It has negatives.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But everything does.
It was more positive.
Yeah.
That's it.
I don't know if I'm for it one way or the other, to be honest, because like Ray said, we've done this for the last 5 years now, 4 years, whatever it's been on the pushback system. I mean, we're all pretty well used to it. While if you're the guy who becomes a victim of the pushback because the guy in front of you breaks a chain in a chicane and you run into the back of him because there's absolutely nowhere else to go and it's non-contestable, that's a tough pill to swallow for sure.
I mean...
And that sucks. It's rare.
Right.
Well, look at the Freddie Slater incident.
Sure.
Dude won the race by 10 seconds and got a pushback because of somebody else's BS.
Right.
Lost a world championship over nothing.
Well,
Right.
I think the biggest thing, though, is, hopefully the good habits picked up on the starts, the lap one deals can continue from the
They
drivers.
did say this last weekend that the starts weren't anything crazy. But then again, Homestead's a 90-degree corner, whichever way you drive it on the start.
The track just kind of works better for the starts then.
Yeah.
We'll just have to see how it goes, to be honest, because
It's a wait and see deal.
it's a wait and see. I think, like you said, there is some merit to the fact that we've all driven under these different basic habits that we've had to apply or adapt to with the pushback system. We'll see if that changes 6 months from now, right? Because time will only tell.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the points that I was making as well, is that I was in favor of the pushback in general for the positives. I think that there's always going to be negatives. What I was interested in was how, not necessarily how it was officiated, because I agree with that as well. It needs to be black and white, unless there's an obvious, this like there's nobody else around, like this is an easy call.
Sure.
And that can absolutely happen. And that's where I kind of go back to on the officiating side. It is hard to say that there's that didn't happen in turn one. On the flip side, if that guy's pole sitter and he was out front the entire time and there's no way he hit anything, and then all of a sudden this thing happened, and there is opportunity for officials to officiate. And so that's,
you mean with or without the pushback?
With, if you have it in there. So a black and white,
right.
I'm not saying that it's across the board, but what I am saying is an official has to have the opportunity to make the right call. Mm-hmm. And I'll use this as an example, as not pushback, but as making the right call. At Sonoma at the challenge, I want to say this is 100cc senior. Timing said one person won, and visual and camera had the other person that they won. And they gave it to the visual, not the timing.
Yeah, of course.
That's the right call.
Yeah, but on the pushback, it's too subjective.
No, I'm with you. And that's what I'm getting at is that this is what it is, and whether that be time or position, because I think some of them do time and some of them do position. I could be wrong, but have it be one of those things where if you can go, hey, that person won, and I can actually, I'll rope this in there as well. Jump start penalties is another thing that irritates the piss out of me as far as like what you get.
If you're the pole sitter, you should never, ever get a jump start penalty.
If it's the black and white stuff, and I think maybe we can go into what was going on, like say in Masters at Supernats, if there's a start box, it should be pretty damn easy to hit this thing in the right spot. I know I was scared as piss that I forgot about which line I was supposed to be at Rock when I was on the off pole, because I went, I'm like, I know I went the right time, but shit, was I supposed to make sure that Matt had the outside for the second line? Well, we're here now, so let's go for it. But at the end of the day, a position penalty for something like that, I think, is asinine. A time penalty, it'd be a little bit different. And the reason why I say that is if I got a jump start penalty for the start and I was already pole sitter, then I didn't gain any positions. Maybe I gained an opportunity or this or that. But to have me go out to, and I want to say this is Dean Carter maybe a few years back, wins at Supernats, I think it is, and ends up having a two-position penalty or something like that on a jump start.
Travis Nudo,
that's what it was, yeah. Are you, Like, that's...
the pole sitter.
I'm not talking about the rule being, like, we don't have a jump start penalty or we don't have pushbacks, but let's just make sure that the penalty fits the crime, if you will.
Individual circumstance or incident by incident situation. I think when you get back to the front bumper thing, I think all that the non-pushback is going to do is put the officials a little bit more on, there's going to be more reliability on the officials in terms of making the judgment call on whether that was completely uncalled for and blatant, or maybe even for that matter, sometimes deserved.
Well, I think that's already been a problem, though. Regardless, with the pushbacks, in my opinion, when they said they were taking pushbacks away, I'm like, well, what does that solve? Doesn't do anything. The pushbacks weren't the problem. It was, at the end of the day, whether it's a false pushback or, honestly, dude, I've dumped people and not pushed the bumper in. Like, it's possible. So, to that point, at those races, there's times I'm like, dude, I am for sure getting a penalty for this. For sure. And all the grid, the girl on the scale line just walking by, seeing if I have a pushback, and I'm like, shit, that's it. I didn't get a penalty. This is sweet.
We can't believe you didn't get a penalty either.
Same.
We weren't even there.
Dude, I was there expecting. I would have signed the paper with a smile on my face, knowing I should have got one.
And maybe you're kind of bringing that up as far as that etiquette goes. Pushback aside, one of the things that irritates me is that lack of respect. And it has nothing to do with the front bumper. When there's someone right next to you and you put them straight in the fence. Mm-hmm. That happened a few times at Supernats, watching on the screen and calling it on the mic, coming out of turn the left-hander, hairpin 4, right? 1, 2, the hairpin, and it kind of jutted back out, and there's people right next to you, and you just drive straight. That is not a pushback bumper problem. That is a lack of respect problem for your fellow competitor.
The guy on the outside should just lift.
Euro swerving's my favorite.
If they're all the way next to me, like Maddie, when you and I race now, I don't prescribe to the putting you in the fence program.
But that's the evolution of all this bumper and pushback. And me and Matt used to race in the 90s, and I raced Matt how he raced me. And so and I got blown off the track, and I'm like, I'd have done the same thing. So I shouldn't have been there. Like. With my son, it's never anybody else's fault but his. That's how I've always brought him up. If he gets railed off the track or he gets run over, I'm like, you shouldn't have been there. I don't go complain. I just say, it's your fault. Yeah. The evolution, I mean, it's just a matter of these organizations sitting down, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. I know I had a conversation with the race director from SCUSA at one race because I had a question. My wife that doesn't even race and go, she barely goes to the races. she brought up a point where the kid had taken Jesus off the track and also had a pushback, but he only got one of the penalties. And so she says, how come that kid, and my race is over. I could care less where that other kid finished. My son's off the track. Who cares? But it bothered her because she says, how come that kid only got a penalty for taking Jesus out and not a pushback? He had a pushback. So I asked the race director, and he says, well, because it happened when he took your son off. And I go, well, wait a minute.
That doesn't even make sense.
That's what he said. And I said, well, how come when my son comes in with the pushback, you don't, it could have happened in the pits or coming off the track. You don't care. You don't look at it. We get a penalty no matter what. But on the flip side, you're kind of looking at like, well, it happened.
The situation, yeah.
Yeah, so I go that, and he agreed. And I was upset with him because I said we literally had a conversation for 5 minutes and I poked a hole in your program. He said, well, we need to look at that. So I just think it's a matter of these organizations sitting down and taking a look at what's going on. I mean, my biggest complaint with the pushbacks right off the bat was everybody needs to be on the same nose. There's so many different noses. I always felt like when we were on the Burrell Art stuff, I felt the OTK stuff had a better nose for the pushback.
Softer nose.
When we were on the Cadet, I felt like on the Burrell Art, we had a better nose than the Tony Car guys. Our nose used to come all the way smashed in, and the guys used to take it off and check it and like, nope, everything's fine. So that has a lot to do with it,
To be fair to that point, the CIK did just mandate how thick the material has to be on the front and rear bumper for next year.
It's a no-brainer.
Yep.
But they should be the same nose with the same pushbacks to everybody.
I agree with that.
That's number one. Why they haven't done that, I don't know. But there's a lot of things they need to look at. For instance, Jesus won Rock the Rio by finishing second, which I disagreed with because they penalized Ingrata for pushing DeLong out of the way, but he didn't have a pushback. And I said, well, how's that? Because now you're talking like, well, he didn't. I mean, that's what the pushbacks are for.
Well, to be fair, it was one of the smoothest bump and runs I've seen in a long time, too. I mean, it was so perfect.
It was so clean.
Like, he didn't kill him. He put a bumper on him.
He put him in second.
He went
Not only that.
He went a groove wide, went underneath him, and took the spot. It was fair and square. Plus, the kid blocked.
Plus, Parker got back ahead.
Oh, that's
and
right.
managed to lose the race again. So I'm like,
if he was able to come back and race, I see what you're saying for sure. As far as he didn't lose the race that way. He was able to come back, fight for it. And the fact that he said he got back in lead, yeah, I see what you're saying.
I mean, but if he hadn't have gone back, it wouldn't have been fair, would it have?
No, it would have.
You guys are weak.
But it's a matter of looking at the situation. I didn't think it was a good call.
Well, it's the same deal like Mike was saying, or like Mike and Ray said about the guy that was out there by 10 seconds or whatever and had a pushback, but he was leading the damn race and he still got a pushback. Now it's the other end where he didn't get a pushback, jump start, whatever.
And that was Rock. I mean, on the same token, Jesus had got a penalty earlier in the week for pushing someone, and we didn't have a pushback. And I'm like, well, what are the pushbacks for? But that's how they were doing it. So, I mean, there's all different ways. You go to a different, even Rock is one side is no penalty. It's a warning.
Right.
It's a warning.
You go to Scusa, it's 3 seconds. The second thing is really weird. I've noticed with Jesus, like sometimes it depends on the event and it depends on the track because like
how much it's going to hurt you.
Like Supernats was painful,
right?
Because everybody would stack up on the last lap, and if you had a pushback, you could go back to 20th.
Plus, if we're keeping it real, do you guys know? I mean, I don't care. I'm just going to say it. Do you guys know how many dudes that finish like 10th, 12th, 15th on back that have time and actually do execute reinstalling the bumper while they're in the damn scale line?
Oh, right.
You know how much of that goes on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of guys that get caught and they get ejected
Have
for
you
the
done
weekend.
it?
Rightfully
Be
so.
honest, right now.
If we're
Have
keeping
you
it
done
real, man.
Keep it
Yes.
real.
Yes, I have.
You've done it.
I've done it.
He did it at Tri-C in 206 when there was no pushback. He was all freaked out.
That's when I did it.
He was trying to move Mike off the
But
track.
honestly, it sucks. It sucks because
You
I'm not
only
proud-
did it because the guy in front of you did it.
I was just about to say, I swear to God, I'm not proud of it, but that's the truth. I got kids all around me, little 14-year-old maggots, fucking putting their bumpers back on. I'm going, Well, if everybody else is doing it and the guy's way up there around the corner, not going to be here for 5 minutes, I might as well fix mine too.
When you're that far back, you got time.
Okay, I
You got
understand.
time.
But no, it sucks.
Well-
It sucks because it's too hard to keep your arms around it.
You know-
To be honest, it's not all bad one way or the other. I think, like I said earlier, if the officials do the best they can to do a good job on policing the bump and run on what's too much and what's not enough and who's got it coming and who doesn't, and you know, try to judge each situation individually to the best of your ability, that's all you can ask for.
Oh, I think that's the biggest thing, like you mentioned earlier.
And
is-
same thing, like if I get bumped out of the way for the win and I finish second or third and the guy doesn't get in trouble for it, that's fine.
Yeah,
now
but
I
you should
know.
have broke earlier, dude.
Well, whatever. But now I know. Now I know what goes and
well,
what
so,
doesn't.
Well, so two things. The first is like what you said earlier is if the pushback isn't a thing, now the officials have to be that much sharper because
I think in defense of the officials, sorry to interrupt, I think it sucks for them either way.
No, I agreed. I just think it is not, and him and I doing a lot of officiating out here is having something that's black and white is always really good. And to Jesus's point earlier, there's way more positives about it than there was negatives. We can tear it apart all night,
Of course.
but the officials, yeah, and not saying that if all the officials, SCUSA, Rock, whatever, are all the same, they now have to be a tick better because they lost that crutch, if you will. And I don't know if that's the best way to put it. Now, as far as the racing on track, I like how you said it's never your fault for the kid, right? It's never it's always your fault. Sorry. I think the biggest part though is knowing who you're racing. Like having spent time with Matt and race on track, you know, there'd be times where I came from a ride and drive karting, so I'm used to holding the outside and shit like that, where you guys would kind of exit out and I'd back out of it or whatever. I'm like, all right, well, now I know what not to do around this guy from now on. But
Right.
I think the biggest thing is, and this kind of you have to have respect for other people on track, but so many kids are just not lifting when they should as well. And know who you're racing, I think, is such a big thing out there.
Yeah, it's going to make the driver a little more accountable in that regard for sure. I mean, you're obviously accountable for keeping your bumper intact, but now you're going to be accountable for each individual driver that you deal with out there. Like you said, I'll be able to race this guy one way and, you know, race
It's
the
a
next guy
basic-
another way.
And all the good guys know
And that's
that.
a good thing to learn about life, especially as a kid. Not everybody.
Jesus races. People ask me all the time, "Is he going to be an IndyCar driver? Is he going to be?" I go, "That's not up to me." I'm like, karting is a life lesson for him, you know, and things like that. I mean, hey, one of the first things you got to learn who you're racing in. If you become a business owner, you got to learn who you're doing business with. If you're dating girls, all those things, they're life
They
lessons.
all like different things.
That's right. And so,
Bit of a connoisseur, Mac Johnson.
You know it.
if he races, if you race Matt races a certain way. You know, you race.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about it's a life lesson, that kind of stuff, and that's what I agree 100%. Where if you, and I always say this when I'm coaching people too, is if you always point the finger at yourself, that's what you can control. I can control me. I can't control anybody else. What I don't like is the blatant finger. You know, like literally, we're racing. This could be a great race, and then instead you decide to wreck me, or and I'll sit in front of me and have two guys. Because I'll be honest with you, I feel like I've gotten to the point in my racing where I'm very rarely in a scenario where I'm going to be put in the fence. I've raced elbows up with all kinds of guys, and usually I'm given the room. I also know there's a point where I need to lift. But I know where that point is. If I'm all the way next to somebody, that's just a lack of respect. Now, if that ever happens to me, I will log that away.
Right.
And the next time I see you, I'm not going to do the Matty J thing because I'm just not built that way. But I am going to put you in the dirt. I am going to try to make it to where you lose even more positions than the one that I was going to just try to get you on my own.
Well, and that's the name of the game. I remember years ago when I hadn't been go-karting for a year maybe or something, and then I came back and raced. And I had to pass,
It's like 86.
what was that guy's name? Scott Saunders. I'd never seen him before, and he had been in the States for like a year or two running with Manning. And we went to Willow for a race, and on the last lap, I was in third or fourth or whatever it was, and this guy defended good, right? So I put the bumper on him, and I did it right like Ingrata did, moved him wide and went underneath him, and onward and upward we went. And he told me that, he goes, okay, now I know not to f with you.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's it. So I think that that's going to be good, especially for these younger guys that operate more in a black and white type of situation or program where Instead, now you know everybody is an individual and they all got to be treated and dealt with differently.
Well, and I think that'll be the curious part too, because as an official, black and white is really challenging. You need to have gray because of situational, to make the right call. There has to be some bits that are black and white, like, hey, stay in the tram line. Hey, it can be black and white.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some other scenarios. What it comes down to is an official, regardless of what those things are, is being consistent. Mm-hmm. If that little shove and go is going to be legal, then it needs to be legal. And it needs to be a thing that everybody knows that that's going to be legal. On the flip side, and this is where it's just a fundamental difference of opinion, I don't think it should be legal, period. I don't like getting moved out of the way.
Neither should blocking then.
Now that's the other piece. That being said, if I pick a defensive line, then I think that's all right. What we don't see a lot of, though, is defensive line. We see either looking over the shoulder or reactionary maneuvers, that kinds of crap. All of that kinds of stuff, that's where the gray area needs to come into play as an official. Because, like, the whole deal. In Grata, if he looked over, did this kind of deal, and gets a little bit of love, guess what? You're going to get a little bit of love. You do stuff like that. But now, honestly, if he goes flip back the other way and the race was not decided that way, I'd be like, okay, as an official, let it ride.
But it could have just as well gone to where, like he mentioned earlier, and it's the truth, you get the brake on a little harder, maybe a little sooner. Might not have happened.
Possibly.
You can prevent that.
Possibly.
If you're that guy in the lead and you're blocking, you should expect to get blasted.
And I guess the question would be is what's blocking and what's defensive? What is okay?
Either or.
Yeah,
okay.
I think
if you're defensive, it's considered blocking.
Technically, yeah. If you choose to move over out of the racing line down the straightaway and you white line it, you're blocking. And if I'm sitting in second, if I'm leading, and I'm going to do that too, especially with pushbacks and everything, but I'm going to break 10 feet before I was going to.
See, I actually have no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Someone can run defensive in front of me, and I have no problem with that. And I don't think they should be moved out of the way. I actually think there's zero issue because that's their line. Now, if they move from said line, that's where I'm like, no, hold on a second, bro. You picked your line. You can't freaking go over here.
That should be a penalty at that point.
Agreed 100%. So what I'm saying is I say picking a defensive line, okay, not blocking. Reactionary moves or trying to make two or whatever, that's all blocking.
I think both are all good, and it should come down to the two drivers. If the one guy feels that the best play is to shove the dude a little wide and cut underneath him, then no problem. And if you can do it by crossing the dude over and getting him on the exit of the corner, more power to you.
And this is a simple product of putting plastic around the whole go-kart.
Yeah.
And also it comes down to the guy in second's ability and confidence. Yeah. Like, certain guys are going to be more comfortable.
But that's the evolution. Look, when the rear bumper came out, besides the car looking, it was weird when it first came out. I'm like, but that caused people being able to do the bump and run, because before you would flip.
Yeah, see ya.
Yeah, and ultimately, we're in roundy round cars now.
When you went to Tri-C, LAKC, anything, there were guys flipping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I tell my son and I tell even Morgan, I go, they were flipping, dude. It was
left and right.
Yeah. Who was it this time? And most people learned
right.
Don't do that.
And the one thing I'll put a point on that too. If it's legal, it's legal. As long as I know it's legal, then I'll keep my opinion to myself. Because if it's legal, it doesn't matter what I like or I don't like. It's freaking legal. So it is part of the deal. And that's my thing. As long as I know what the hell's going on, great. That's how we're racing. Yeah. I now choose how I want to race. That's up to me. Race how you want to be raced is my kind of thing. And I don't want to do that. And if it happens to me and it's legal,
that should be everybody's thing, but it's not.
Fair. But I need to keep my trap shut.
Right.
I can't cry about it because it's legal.
If I'm the race director, I think we need to run each other pretty straight up. And when the white flag comes out, have at it.
Nuke 'em.
Well, no. It's not no holds.
Matt takes off the headset.
It's not
walks away from the stand.
It's not no holds barred. But it's what, especially if it's a 2-horse race or even 3. May the best man win.
Yep.
It's tough. I've seen some really good
a nice
races
fair scrap
come down to the end, and the guys race each other hard. I mean, there's some pushing and shoving, and it's a fabulous thing. And then you've seen some other stuff where it's just like.
Well, I think another part too, guys, is
that's not good.
There's going to be a difference of fish, and I would imagine there's going to be a difference in officiating from a club race to regional to national, and what people are going to think is legal and clean, whether it's the officials thinking what's legal and clean versus what the driver's going to think what's legal and clean.
I agree and disagree with that only because certain different programs that are national programs, that, for instance, like the NKA, it's a sanctioning body for karting. They have one rule book that goes to the club, that goes to the regional, that goes to their national program.
Right.
So they're able to distribute that rule book evenly. These are the rules. If you're on our program, these are the rules. And that's it.
And I think we could also argue that it's how said rules are enforced or not enforced.
That's the biggest difference is the race director. For instance, and I will say this openly and honestly, is what SCUSA 4 or 5 years ago with their previous race director, in my opinion, was the best officiated series in the country. I have not personally been back to one since certain other people have been put in place because it's turned into a little bit more of a poor job. And it's easy to get into that. To their defense, it's easy for that to happen with the pushbacks because the black and white that we all talk about is as simple as a time or a position penalty per your pushback or whatever it may be. But that to me, that's caused a void in, the Euro swerving is such BS to me that you have a free trip to the barriers if you want to Euro swerve me, because that's not racing at that point.
For those that don't understand what the Euro swerve is,
it's getting up next to somebody when you're on the inside of somebody and they decide to huck the wheel at you and side pod you. To me, that's the most dangerous thing you can do on a racetrack.
Just popping somebody.
Yeah, just popping into somebody and trying to maneuver around them or swerve at them or hit them or whatever the hell it may
basically
be.
Is what they're trying to do.
Usually they're too dumb to intimidate you and they hit you. So that causes somebody to go flipping through the air at 65, 70 miles an hour down a straightaway, and it's just not right. It's not racing. That's the opposite of racecraft. But that's happened because of the pushbacks. That's just become a thing naturally for the racers over the last few years. But that's where I say there's lazy officiating, and it's not maybe it's not the actual official himself or herself, but it's more or less the rules that we've put in place because of the pushbacks. Now we're down to time and position penalties that are black and white, clear as day. You either have a pushback or you don't, or you fix it in the scale line, whatever.
I agree. One of the series, like, you go in there and they have a book for everything. And then they go down, it's like a math equation, and then it's like, oh yeah, you got a 5-second penalty. And I'm like, how it was just odd. Instead of, there was a few races early on that Jesus had where the driver, we were leading in this one case, and the driver took us out. Like, it was an incident where we went out and the kid kept going and ended up getting, I think, like a 5-second penalty. And I go, how did you come up with that? I'm just curious. And they open up a book and they had the call of what happened, the incident. And then it was like basically just wording. It was like, it was this. So then we go
Saturday,
here.
the sun was out. There was a cloud in the sky.
And
avoidable contact penalty.
It was something like that. And it was just like, but I just remember in the old days when I raced, if I took someone out, I finished behind them.
Yep.
That was very simple.
Because what can happen is let's say we're in a 2-horse race, which was similar to this situation, and I think this is where that conversation went because I remember this. So what happens if I just kill the guy in second, go on to win the race by 6 seconds? All I got coming is a 5-second penalty.
Yeah, and he said yes.
That's 100% wrong. And I think that's where
and I saw that happen. That happened to somebody.
That happened to Ron Jenkins at Indiana.
Yeah, there was only 2 guys on the track, and the guy took him out, and then the guy kept going, and he won. He's like, well, he got a penalty
for unavoidable
but the other
contact,
driver didn't finish.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what I was mentioning about that it's not,
and it's
not
what
necessarily
he said. It's
about
like,
the rule book or whatever. It's or like even the rules with the pushbacks or this. It's how they are enforced and what penalties are attached to them. And I think those are the things that you got to look at and be like, really?
We had this example at Supernats too with Brent Cruz. Even like the chassis tag was another thing at Supernats, right? The kid lost his fast lap. It put him 17 spots back. Versus you could go out there and push your bumper back in qualifying. There's pushback rules apply there too. And you lose it's a 5-position penalty for a pushback even in qualifying. But so you can go out there and literally put somebody in the hospital borderline, right? And ruin them. And it's 5 spots. But they put the chassis tag on the wrong side, and it ended up because his second lap wasn't very good or whatever.
If these guys,
ends up being 17.
if their businesses,
look at the penalties.
And I've talked to them. I mean, if their businesses like I had the conversation with the guy from the schools, I go, I'm like, do they pay you? I'm like, because we just had a 5-minute conversation, and we found out from my wife that there's an issue here.
Yeah, there's a hole in the program.
I'm like, do we not sit down? And he asked me to go up there and help. And I said, I'm not here to do that.
The only thing I'll add to that is that you don't make any changes to the rules in the middle of the season. Right? That's the only thing. That
I agree.
But you could enforce them, or go about it properly.
You wouldn't. Obviously,
Look,
you could do that out of the gate, but you don't change whatever it is that you're doing. So it should have been like,
it's a tough job.
Good call. We're going to add that to it, put it on our board to look at for next year. And that's the thing, is that these kinds of conversations we should have done this a month ago or so.
Maybe
let everybody else know.
The bottom line with this whole pushback conversation, I'm going to tell you what I really think. At the end of the day,
you didn't do that earlier.
Hardly ever. The guys up front, it's going to be the same old song and dance. Where it's going to be hard for the officiating is in the middle of the pack when all the shit's going down. That's the truth.
That's where the eyes are never at.
Right. That's where you're going to get the pissed off parent or mechanic going and trying to bitch at the official and this and that and the other. And that's where their camera system's going to come into play, and that's going to help. And it's just going to be a different set of circumstances, I think, that the race directors are dealing with now.
I felt like the pushback bumpers in play through the years, or at least as much as I've done it, there's been, maybe 5 or 10 situations where it was like, that wasn't right.
Yeah, it's more.
Yeah.
There's not very many.
Without them,
it's blown
it
wide
was
open.
a list.
Yeah. I think the simple answer to that is I was an advocate for the pushbacks, other than in shifter, because there's way too much cat and mouse in shifter, and you stack them up deep. Yeah, I mean it just shouldn't be a thing in KZ. But anyways, other than that, I'm a super fan of the pushback. Again, you can move somebody with a pushback, a clean move, not a completely just dump this dude, ruin his weekend, bend the freaking rear frame rails up. That's going to push the bumper in. But you can get under somebody and you can move them out of the way, one lane over without getting a pushback. I've done it a lot.
Race was doing that all weekend at Antonino.
It is, that's what we were practicing. And it's sad. Why do I have to teach that kid that? Because it's going to happen to us if we don't. He's moving up to junior. This is a perfect example. Last 3 days, 2 of those days, all we worked on was efficient defensive driving. And then when you got to put the horn to somebody on the white flag lap because he decides the white line, we're not trying to wreck the kid. We're trying to get that spot.
Yeah.
And that's what we tested. And isn't that pretty fucking sad that I got to do that with him?
It is, especially when you're in the 100cc and he's still in a cadet. That doesn't make any sense.
Let's back up.
We
were all here. Yeah. He was in 100cc as well. So let's not start that crap. But no, that's just part of it now. But I think at the end of the day, pulling the pushbacks off is the wrong move, for one. And two, I think, if you're going to look at something to improve, let's improve the camera system thing that they're talking about implementing. Great. That's an improvement. Let's improve on, maybe change the structure of our penalties a little bit. Again, if you dump somebody and you ruin their race, you should finish behind them. It's that simple. That's how it always was. Half a bumper, whatever it may be. But the officiating, again, has been lazy because it's designed to be that way almost. But if you still watching the race, if you're watching that race for the win, moving somebody out of the way for the win, if they're white lining, to me, that's racing at the end of the day. But taking somebody out and not getting a pushback and you only get a 5-second penalty, or Euro swerving somebody off the racetrack and then hurting them or ending their day and you don't get a penalty, come on. That's just lazy officiating at that point. But that's because now the rules are set so black and white that this is all we get.
Well, I think we can all agree we like the pushback. We're going to be sad to see it go.
I don't care either way.
Here's the problem.
Well, Matt doesn't have
you
to care
want to know what the problem is?
You could tell us we got to put the
Let's
damn
hear
rear
it,
tires on
Jesus.
the front. I don't care.
I think the real problem is a respect issue regardless.
Here's
because,
the problem.
Listen, me and Matt, we have one race that we've ever done together probably, and we beat the crap out of each other in a clean way. We both finished, right?
Yeah,
in
within
front
one
and
spot
behind.
of each other, yeah.
Yeah, and we beat the shit out of each other the whole time. But we came off the track and was like, dude, yeah, I gave it to you once, and then it just started a deal. We shook hands, had a great time, and that was it.
And as long as both drivers come away from it, they're on the same page, and
They
we're
should
still
be,
racing.
but
It's
these
all
kids,
good.
it's
And
not
Matt
like
and
that
I had
anymore.
the other end of the spectrum where we barely touched at all. Still had a hell of a fun scrap, and he beat me. Maybe I should have put him in the fence.
Well, right, but then it goes back to what we talked about earlier: is knowing who you're racing with. Like it's been mentioned before, it was Jesus filmed it actually, and Christian talked about it. I had to show that little guy a lesson at Lancaster, and that was prior to pushbacks. But he knew he had it coming, and he got it. And we talked about it afterwards because he was pissed. I mean, he's an alpha male, so he's telling me at 14 years old, well, I'm just going to wreck you every time we race. I said, that's fine, Christian. I said, you can get me next weekend. I go, but then next weekend after that, I'm going to come and get you, and then you're going to get me the next one.
How long
and I'm
do you
going to
want
get
this to
you,
go?
and then one of us is going to go to the hospital or maybe not get to race no more. I said, but I'll keep going if you want to keep going. And that's where the dialogue comes in. Now you're learning to deal with people, different people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know? A life lesson from go-karting.
Yeah. How about that?
Well, that's the hardest part about it too. Is like, you know, you get like it happens now that I'm in 100 cc is actually pretty freaking hard to survive in. You know, you get blasted by 15, 16, 17, whatever. Who cares what age they are? You get blasted by somebody you've never seen race before, whatever, and then you give it back, and then after the race they come up to you going, "What the hell?"
Right.
And pissed, and you're like, "What do you mean? What the hell? You tried putting me in the barriers literally 2 corners before that. Did you not expect me to retaliate?" And they look at you like you got 10 eyes because you got pushbacks and you're not supposed to do that. Well, you already did it. So at this point, I stopped caring about my pushback penalty if I even get one.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll think about it next time.
No, I raced hard, and I put it to some people. And then when they were behind me, I'm like, it's you know, and when I got it, I'm like, yeah.
And that goes back to what I was saying about racing how you want to be raced. If you don't have an issue, or I should say, I rephrase, if you understand the repercussions of your actions and you can live with those actions, you shut up if it happens back to you. Like race how you want to be raced. If you're going to race that way, then it's going to come back. And otherwise,
one time I moved someone out of the way, and the guy made me feel bad about it. It was Luis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I moved him at Willow. Same, I think it was an IKF National or Grand National, and I moved him out of the way. It was for like 4th. I got penalized for it too, but when we got to the scales, the only thing he had to say to me was, you know, I never raced you like that.
That's all you got to say.
And I'm like,
that's enough to kill it right
yeah,
there.
and I'm like,
Those from Louis?
Was it true?
it was absolutely true.
See?
That's what I said. I felt bad. I'm like, you know what, Louis? You're right.
and that's I know I should be able to use that, and I still haven't had the opportunity.
You didn't have
yet.
that coming, but that's true.
No,
you know?
it is.
And
Last time Louis ever talked to you, right there.
no, but it's like that actually had merit. Like,
Right.
man, I guess he's right. Not to mention for 4th place, like what, you know? So I think
We know what you did to Phil Giebler over here anyway for $100.
Yeah, and he didn't have that coming either. That was after that too.
Or at Machismo.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, no.
But
Jeez.
but
It's a
no,
different
it just
podcast.
comes back to you know, self-policing, if that's the right word or not, I don't know, but just you know.
Well, you know, so honestly, it's hard for me to understand because I didn't come from the walks of karting like you guys did with less body work, different officiating, however the racing was done. So,
See, the officiating then, other than the penalty for KOing somebody,
right.
I don't really remember, like, there really weren't that many penalties, right?
You had to do some
You
gnarly stuff to get like a real black flag.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around without seeing some of the stuff. I mean, totally get it, but from seeing how the racing is done now and the stuff being so much more blatant.
At the end of the day, it's just a different sport now. Like
Right.
it's just a little different, you know. There was something again we touched on the other day. There was, you know, I don't even remember traveling to the East Coast as a kid because you didn't have to. You could race every weekend in California, and you could pick and choose what series you were at and what program you liked and blah 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 right here in California, and you never had to go to Florida.
That was what I was beginning to say earlier as far as what I feel, you know, as a whole. I mean, we can talk about all these different things. To me, it's having essentially, you know, 13-year-olds driving big rigs. There's no licensing,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, you got your permit, you can get in the big rig and go drive, you know, and it's likely they're going to crash. I mean, they could probably do it, but once they get in a situation with that big rig, they're going to wreck.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
about
what happens.
probability and risk.
That's what happens in karting right now. Guy gets in a cart, you know, next thing you know, I mean, I have these guys running mid-pack at LAKC at best, and then their next event is we're going to go to a USPKS race. And I'm like, I you know, I don't know, but it's like, we're just going to go to have fun or do these things. And it can be fun, you know, but then you end up with all of these different mixes in the field. And a lot of those guys aren't ready for that.
Right.
And what ends up happening through the years, what I've seen, even for example, when 206 came out, when 206 came out, you had a lot of these veterans coming back and running in. It was cool for a show, but then eventually the beginners were like, how am I going to beat these guys? Right? I don't think that you should have had a lot of those guys. You know, you had Calvo running 206 Junior mopping up everybody, and it was just like getting these easy wins. And some of the events were cool, okay, but they shouldn't have been allowed to come back.
Yeah, we did used to have a system in place where, like, if you had yellow plates, you couldn't go
It's
back
like
and run
IKF deal.
you couldn't run a can class, and then for that matter, you had to find your way.
That's
out
how
of
you end up solving a lot of these issues, and you end up keeping carders longer, right?
Yeah.
That's the trick
Because-
thing right there is keeping people in this
Right
sport.
now,
Yeah.
what happens is they run a year of club, then they're going to Supernats, they're going to Pro Tour. They realize after a year or two, it's going to be impossible for them to win. They keep spending, buying this team, that team. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. That chassis doesn't work.
When the reality is they didn't cut their teeth the right way in the first
Your
bloody
engine
place.
is slow.
Yeah.
100%.
They're out of here.
But it's changed. It's completely changed.
Yeah.
Our parents used to. My dad built all of our engines growing up.
The
Because
amount
it's
of
different, you know.
I think, and obviously it's different for everybody individually, but I think when you make more money, you have less time. So maybe not having the opportunity to instill the values, or for that matter,
It's the parents.
but that's
The
what it comes down to.
Listen, the parents
That's
are
what I was
the
trying to say in a
number
nice way.
one problem.
100%.
Unless
That's what I was saying. You don't want me to say what I got to say.
And let me tell you something.
Zach don't want me to say it.
Let me tell you something. Unless you're a parent, you don't know what it's like. Okay, I've been doing I raced with pennies. Okay, I raced. I didn't know that I was going to the next race. Okay, and I understand it. I understand the emotions. I understand all of it. As a parent, as much as I know, I can watch my son out there and blame the engine, knowing 100% it's not the engine. So I know as a parent that doesn't understand that and didn't build their own engine, how they can see that it's the engine. Okay. And I can see how just when it's your son out there, I mean, take my credit card and whatever it costs. And if there's no control, I have my own control. Because I go home, I drive, and I go, that's not right. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know better. You know better. And I talk myself out of it. And I set up a plan. I talk to my son. I talk to my wife. I talk to myself. From experience, this is the direction I need to go. Regardless of what the industry or what little Johnny's doing, you know, because Jesus will say, he's racing this, he's racing that. I go, I know, you're not. And this is why. Right. So I didn't understand that until I had my son and he started racing competitively. I'm like, wow, when your son's out there,
You're
and I
emotionally
know the
involved.
emotion of having a client out there for the first time with your engine and he's leading, that gets your heart racing, right? Like
sure.
that's my engine, or I coached him, or I set up the go-kart. That's like but when it is your son, forget about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even that high or low of a guy, and I can see some other parents that are, and so it's out of control, and so that I feel is the number one problem. And unless you have some sort of system to control, you know, set and these big teams, they have to put up the big tent because those clients are going to go somewhere else and get that.
That's what they want to have. They want to be a part of that big program. Is what
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
saying.
Seth could
Well,
tell
they
them
feel
like
they need it.
you could tell them you should. It's got to be controlled to where they have to have a certain amount of. I mean, a brand new kid right now that has zero experience can race Supernats. Am I wrong?
right
I
now.
need you to sign up. Yeah.
If
sign
you
up.
have never driven a go-kart,
I think you just have to get a SCUSA membership, and they automatically give you a B license,
Yep.
and you go from there.
and you never driven a go-kart, and the first time you hit the track could be Vegas.
Yeah, and,
come on.
That's insane.
and a lot of that, like you said, the parents are going to be part of that for sure. The other part of that is going to be the organizations, and I mean the teams that support that decision.
But it's a business because if the guy goes to Seth and says, "Hey, here's 10 grand or 20 or 30 or 40 grand. I want to go race this race." That's like you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And some teams will turn them away.
And that's what needs to happen at bare ass minimum. You need to be able to go, hey, this is a really bad idea, and here's all the reasons why it's a
But
bad idea.
How are you going to take? How are you going to not take the 10 grand as a
No, that's
local
what
business?
that's what I was just
Right.
going to say, because I've done that with stuff here. Is yeah, I will take your money for coaching or whatever, but you don't need coaching. You just need to go drive. You just need more practice. So to that same vein, granted, much smaller number, it's at minimum, this is a really bad idea. I will take your money, but you'd be better off taking that 10 grand, 20 grand and go do a season and go do some more practice and come watch Super Nats and be a part of the team and do that kinds of stuff. And that
They
kind of
won't
thing.
though, because the high is so high, they don't think straight.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. It makes perfect. And
And
again,
if
I don't
there's
have
nothing there to control them.
Why not?
Well, and again, that's how do you control them? I guess that is the question. How do you make something
Licensing.
like that happen?
Personally, I was going to say that.
And how would that licensing
I mean, there
work?
could be someone has to sit down and put something together. I mean, SCUSA could say, "Hey, you can't enter a Pro Tour race if you haven't at least entered X amount of pro kart races.
Absolutely.
You can't enter a pro kart race if you haven't entered an X amount of club races." But something or somehow that needs to be logged.
And here's the challenging part to that right out of the gate. The challenging part is that is a long, and it's not wrong. I agree with it. The challenging piece is on the short term, they're going to look at it as money lost. Instead of getting that person to go spend more money at the top end, what you're actually going to do is you're going to have them stay in the sport longer.
But that's been the topic of this sport for the last 5 years, is only short term. I haven't seen, as I've grown up and matured and gotten older and now taken an interest in hoping to grow this sport in my own way, I haven't seen in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years any long-term plan. There's a few guys out there that are trying, honestly, I praise the NK and the Stars program back east. It's a Midwest series, but putting some structure together. We're missing what Europe actually has as a structure. You're not going to go run a WSK race if you're first weekend to karting. You're not allowed to. There's a licensing structure. There's a resume you have to send in to even get a license. Or even you look at the United States, we have the SCCA for car racing. Dude, you have to go through a driving school and you got to spend 10 grand to get an SCCA pro license.
Right.
So it's not as simple as, show up, pay the entry fee, pay the team, and go racing, which again is really tough to police and implement when our sport is at the stage it's at. Again, there's an influx of money. The dollars and cents being spent on this sport right now is healthy, but the people and the participation is not quite as healthy as it used to be when we grew up racing.
Well, and to your point, you mentioned earlier, how is that small business going to turn down that money?
You can't.
Right? You can't. So if it wasn't their decision to make, i.e., if the organizations running the show, the SCUSAs, your USPKSs, they would be the ones that would have to enforce this. And it's not like it hasn't happened before. We talked about IKF and different things that were done in the past with different plates and things like that. And even the arrive and drive stuff we have here, our goal is to have you be in the sport as long as possible. It's a good business move, is to have you inside racing, inside karting as long as possible. So we have our sprint series and then a super series after that. And then inside those things are subcategories. You start out as a bronze level driver. You get to a certain level, you become silver, and then gold and platinum. And there's a subcategory for the bronze people who are brand new because they're not going to go win. It's not possible. It's i.e. pilot, that kinds of stuff.
What you do with a system like that, too, is you actually cultivate a true competitor, someone that's striving for more.
Yeah, there's always a carrot in front of them.
Yeah, if there's a carrot in front of you, you again, it goes back to the desire thing and just being an actual, it's the true spirit of being a competitor. It's like you set personal goals for yourself. Okay, I need to finish here, or I need to achieve this so I can do this next.
It's what Jesus was saying earlier about the Munchkin.
My dad, I probably mentioned it before. My dad wouldn't let me go to an IKF race until I won a club race. And I couldn't go to a club race until I cut a particular lap time. I mean, that's just the way it was for me and with him and a lot of us.
A lot of the kids in the 90s, we talked about it with Zimmerman and other people, you had to do blank before you can move up, period. You just had to show some kind of competency before you moved up.
I remember growing up, I always looked at IKF and when I was just a club racer at Willow Springs at Gold Coast Karters. And, I was always like, Dad, I want to go race IKF. I want to go do this. I want to go do that. And the only IKF race we did for 5-6 years was the one that came to Willow Springs Raceway because that was our one race a year. My dad goes, okay. here. We're at least we're at our
You're
local
proficient
track
here, yeah.
Yeah, you finish top 3 every weekend in the club races. The guys that were beating me were top 5 guys in the nationals. It was Stefan Sierra and Joey Licata, 2 badass drivers. And I was never beating them, but they were always top 10 guys at the regional stuff in the Region 7. So when Region 7 came to town, that was the only race my dad ever let me go, okay, let's go see what we have. We're
It's your measuring
here.
stick right there.
Exactly. And that's gone completely out the window. His son is the last kid in the last probably 5 to 10 years that has even gone down that path. There was a few kids when I still lived here that I finished dead freaking last at a LAKC race or a pro kart race, and then you'd see him at a pro tour race, and you're like, what are you even doing? Why are you even wasting your time here? From not only the money standpoint, but even just what are you doing to your kid?
Well, a lot of them think that it makes the kids better. And I disagree.
It beats them down.
Well, you're going to get better by going against people who are better than you, right? You by raising your bar. However, if that already could happen at the club level,
correct,
then you don't need to be beat by 30 more people to learn the same. Like, you might actually learn less. There's some people I saw like at the back end of the Supernats. Like, to your point, there's absolutely people at Supernats that did not need to be there because
they got black flag.
Completely demoralized.
Yeah, exactly. So, wow, instead of finishing 10th out of 15 at my club level and a second off the pace, I'm 5 seconds off the pace, 45th out of 45, and I can't even see the next driver. How is that fun? How am I learning anything? There's nobody there.
And then the parent complains that they get black flag because their kid is about to get lapped at the freaking Supernats.
For some of them, it's all about the hype. It's the culture we're in now.
Well,
They get to post it on social media. Hey, I'm at the Supernats. Look at me. Track walk. This, that, the other.
That's what I was going to ask right now. We kind of started off earlier talking about accelerated program, just going through club, regional, national, all so fast.
Well, that's what social media is instant gratification.
What I was going to say was, for guys that have been in it as long as you have, when do you think that really started becoming a thing of when you woke up one day and you came to track, you're like, this kid is moving through shit way too quick?
When social media became a thing.
Really?
It's completely truthful, yeah. And honestly, like, okay, after the recession, the sport took a massive hit. I mean, if you were around in 06, 07, it was thriving. I mean, we had a IKF National here in 06, and there was so many people here, we couldn't even use the parking lot that you guys use for pits. We had to go across the freaking street. There were 600 entries here.
Yeah.
And again, that was just region. That was IKF. That was only a West Coast program. 600 entries on a West Coast only program. So you're looking at karting you have to look at it in a different way anyways. But to that point, when social media, between the recession and social media kind of coming in, both of them kind of, one depleted the sport. The other one gave instant gratification to what you were able to do. Matt and I actually have worked with the same driver that's all they gave a shit about. Didn't care to come win a local race, but they would just go straight to Pro Tour, get their ass kicked, and then eventually blame the team, blamed the coach, blamed the engine, blamed the this, blamed the that, and kept going back and forth and just spending more money. Eventually said, "Fuck it, we're out."
Well, and actually, I had an incident with one driver this year in senior. It was, I think he did maybe like half a year last year. Natural talent, came out of the gate pretty hot. Did a full year this year at Tri-C and did some other stuff. But the dad comes up to me because the dad's he's new to it, trying to figure out what path to go and all this other kind of stuff. And he goes, "What do you think we should do?" I'm like, "Well, what's the kid trying to do?" He's like, "Well, we want to do Tri-C, but he doesn't want to do Tri-C anymore. He wants to go do Pro Kart, do Pro Tour." I'm like, "Well, why does he want to do that?" He goes, "Well, because his friends are doing it." I'm like, "No." I'm like, "You can't follow the trend." I'm like, if the kid's out here finishing 5th, at Tri-C, don't go take him to that. As good a glimpse as he can have towards winning or whatever, as all the smarts he can have on track at times, just don't rush it. I think that's the toughest part is parents, individuals feeling pressure from other drivers or teams.
Well, even kids losing the sense of, like, at the end of the day, every day I get to spend on this on any racetrack, I'm having, regardless whether it's a good day, a bad day, whatever, I'm having fun. And I was raised to have fun doing what I love at the go-kart track. And it seems like this has turned into more of like a measuring contest.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Monkey see, monkey do. A measuring contest.
Well, even sorry, like Jesus said, it's like there's times when Buddy probably sees things on social media, or even, I mean, let's be honest, it's not the only form of communication out there. He obviously speaks with his peers, and it's like, well, this guy's going to this race and that guy's going to that race, and it all looks good. You know what I mean? But when you look at all the back end side of it and at what expense and the value in return,
and I think that's,
it's a different conversation.
The expense part, that's Jesus, you brought up earlier about the, when it's your kid out there. Like, I don't have kids, but I remember when I was a kid, and it was my parents putting it together. We didn't have a lot of money either. I didn't know how little we had, and what my dad, how much he was doing to make that happen for me. But the deal for me was I had to have good grades, and if I didn't have good grades, they were going to pull me. And then my dad didn't pull me, and he finished out the season. And then years later, I get older, and we're reminiscing about it. And he goes, "I tell you what, kid, it broke my heart to pull you out, but I had to, because it was the right thing to do." And it's kind of like you talk about talking to yourself, saying, "Don't do it. It's not a good idea." Like my dad and my mom, they both made a decision. Like, we didn't have money coming out our asses to go spend money on karting, even though they thought I was halfway decent. They didn't have that kind of money, and I didn't hold up my end of the bargain, so they had to hold up theirs. Some of the stuff that happens out here, we go back to, you have to have a goal. You got to have fun. And I can't speak to the parents, but I'm so curious as to their thought processes to just dump money, just flush money down the toilet. And I mean that when it's on these big things, just because little Johnny wants to do it. There's no structure. And maybe that's part of the problem. We go back to like the licensing thing and those kind of stuff. There's no requirement for the structure versus ball sports where there is that standard ladder all the way up. Maybe that's the lack of structure allows them to straight to the top.
It does, because I have a friend and a customer that is actually from out here, started 2 years ago, and the guy's now running. He went to Europe once last year, second year karting. Kid went to Europe, now running with a American factory-based team, paying out the ass to do it. And he comes up to me and goes, "Man, dude, this shit's expensive. Why didn't you tell me this when I got into it?" I knew him before they got into karting. And I go, "No, it's not." And he's like, "What do you mean?" "Yes, it is. I spent X amount." I said, "Yeah, you chose to. You didn't choose to learn how to tune it yourself or work on it yourself. You chose that. So now you're paying a mechanic and a team. You chose not to take the engine thing into your own hands. Granted, you need an engine builder, but at the end of the day, you don't have to pay a guy to turn the fucking needles if you have the knowledge behind it." You know what I mean? Like, you can learn all of those things. I pay my engine builders to build my engine, and I don't call them until it's ready for a rebuild, because I know how to turn the needle and I know how to look at the reads and blah, blah, blah. I was raised in a different way, and we were all raised that way, where we took things into our own hands to save money. We spent our time to save that money, right? So I hate hearing people say that this sport is expensive, because this is the cheapest form of motorsports on the planet.
Especially if you underline and bold motorsports. But to that point, and this is where I want to kind of ask you this, Jesus, you were head of a team that I don't know if money was no issue, but you had the other end of the spectrum. Was there still structure in that regard as far as what could be spent, what could not be spent? It was still had to be a business, still had to have a direction with that kind of stuff, right? It wasn't a scenario where we're just dumping money because we don't care.
So,
you're asking me when I ran Louis?
Yes.
Like a loan?
Yeah. We're basically, this is my driver. We're getting after it. We're buying the engines, making shit better. Those days.
Yeah, when you kind of police the Louis thing.
So that came down to, spending the money. I mean, we ultimately didn't have much of a budget, but we spent a lot of the time working on the driver, on what the things I felt that mattered. To me, I always tell guys this, look, and granted, it's what I do for business, but the engine, everybody makes the engine out to be the unicorn, the hardest thing. And to me, I always tell guys, I don't look at it that way, maybe because I'm the engine builder, but yes, it's the only thing we can put on a machine and test. I mean, nowadays, my new dyno, I can push a button and the thing tests itself. There you go. Does it run or doesn't it run? Like hit print, and then we could put your engine on and the engine that won, and then hit start, and then it's going to print out a sheet. You can't do that with the driver or the chassis or anything.
Right.
So it's like engine, easiest thing to put that over on the side. I mean, at worst, you can see that guy win. Just go buy it.
Yeah.
Go claim it.
Yeah.
It's
You know
easy.
what I mean?
It's
You don't even
retail
have
plus
to claim
500.
it.
Go get it.
You don't even have to claim it. Just go buy it.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like I constantly parade my son's engine, and people think, a lot of times they think I do it. I go, no, I'm in the business to sell engines. He runs engines because I want to sell them.
Weird.
Come buy it. Yeah.
It's actually,
You know.
I love that about him is he puts it on Facebook. You can buy my son's engine right out of tech after the race. I
And
love that.
people do. It's not as people do it privately. So they do get sold, and when sometimes when I'm not selling them enough, that's when I put it out there. I go, hey, remember, right? But in any case, we focused on, again, it's just a matter of sitting down and coming up with the plan. How do I win races? How did we win races in the past? How do people win races? You know, how does any of these guys that are winning races at the top level win races? Is it money? I mean, part of it, yes, but I mean, you have to be good at
The little
driving.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
The driver, bottom line, is the biggest factor.
Aaron Nelton, I probably told all you guys that Aaron Nelton told me this a long time ago, and somebody probably told him this, but seconds in a driver, tenths in a chassis, hundredths in a motor.
Yeah.
That's it. If you're off by a second, do
And
this.
The beautiful thing
Right here.
the last 10 to 15 years we've had is data.
Right.
Growing up, none of us had data.
No.
We had a Micron too that gave you your RPM and your lap time with, if you remembered to put the beacon out on the practice
Well,
day.
and before that, Paul Bonilla had a Casio on his steering wheel.
Yeah, and you used to, some of those guys used to hit the stopwatch.
Yeah.
But
That
now
is
we
the
have-
greatest thing with Jesus and the data.
yeah,
Like guys come up and they're like 2 seconds off.
Right.
And I go, well, let's, with Jesus, anybody that runs my engines, his data is open.
Well,
I
and the
don't
guy-
hide it. I don't keep it a secret.
Well, and the guy that's 2 seconds off he's not going to be able to look at the track and say, my kid's doing this.
But they're coming to me because the engine isn't running.
Right.
But then I show them on the data. I go, show me where the engine isn't running.
Right.
And then it's like, it's clear as can be that it's not the engine. In some cases, their engines look better.
right.
Right.
Yep.
It does happen. And I go,
Oh, it happens all the time.
I really think the engine isn't the problem.
Yeah, actually, I just had that conversation with Seth Nash not too long ago. There was a driver that was complaining about an engine, and he literally I just did a little swap-a-rooney. So here you go, check it out, and they went the exact same speed with the other motor that was quote allegedly faster. And sometimes you just need that little bit of shot in the arm. We were talking about this. We started this piece here about the licensing and like how that would work out. And you guys were around during the IKF stuff, and IKF was never as big when I was as a kid. It was just club racing for me. I didn't get a chance to do that kind of stuff. By the time I did get rolling, it was in the mid 2000s, and I was out. You guys got a chance to do the IKF stuff, and there was this a ladder system. I remember we were talking to Billy Cleveland and some of these other drivers were like they just wanted to get to that next plate, right? They're talking about that next plate type.
Mm-hmm.
The Duffy.
There's obviously the big carrot at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to work your way up. Right now, the argument would be Pro Tour, USPKS. Those are like the two big things that are out there, the big carrots. How do you instill that in the drivers now? And is it possible from the top down, because I think it would have to be the top down, to start building or requiring maybe a little bit of a program like that?
Well, that's the hardest part. IKF, they had their regional, and they did it a little different. They had their they had a shifter kart national, and then they had their sprint national and their road racing national, and they had one national a year, kind of like the equivalent, I guess, of a super nats. And you had punches, so you had to do a couple regionals, I think it was 3 regionals a year to even qualify to show up for a national.
Which
So
the nationals were mid-year.
Mid-year.
So it was not as easy as doing.
yeah, there was 5 races you had
Right.
you could attend if you were in one region. There was multiple regions throughout the West Coast. But you had to go to 3 of, if you were in region 7, there was 5 races before the nationals. It was midsummer, August usually, I think. And there was 5 opportunities. You had to go hit 3 of those to even get your punches to participate in this one. You can go to NorCal and run region, I think it was 11.
11, yeah.
You can go run region 11 too, but you had to earn your punches there. there wasn't a licensing system per se, unless you won. I think was it 2 Duffies? You were an expert.
It was participation based. You had to at least
you at least had to be at the level before.
If you had 2 Duffies as a senior, you were an expert, and then you could just show up. And
no
race.
punches. Yeah. So it wasn't exactly
2
a
Duffies,
licensing.
though, back then. That's brilliant.
Yeah. No, that was a lot. That was like 2 Super Nats.
Although you could actually run 8 classes on one weekend, though, too.
Yeah.
That was also, we used to average was 4 easy.
Yes.
There wasn't a licensing structure though. The closest we ever got was SCUSA, and honestly, actually in the shifter category was the only place we really saw it implemented. I'm baffled that we don't have it in the KA to X30 program at the national level. I think if you're a B license, you should be stuck in KA.
It's going to be a problem. Listen, look at your national series right now. USPKS and Pro Tour, X30. What happens when those X30 guys leave? Or the national, you always have your national group that stay there. It's what happened to Rotax. Rotax was this, for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 3 years, it was the same drivers. And what happened was no one else was coming to party. And eventually it got to a point where like, there's no one else. And these guys eventually leave. They had nothing. And if you look at like Pro Tour SCUSA, where are our next X30 drivers coming from? Where are they coming from? Cal Speed?
Not much out here nowadays.
They coming from Pro Kart? Where are these next X30 juniors coming? They're not coming from anywhere. They're gonna come the same kids that managed to stay at that pro level from, which is gonna be a small percentage of your cadet drivers that are gonna stay with it. Are they going to eventually move up to X30 Junior?
Yeah, and like he just mentioned out of KA, and that actually makes me think of Blake Nash. And I had asked Blake if what he was doing, if he was, this is going to the Supernats, are you going to do, 100cc, you're going to do X30? He's like, nah, I'm not doing X30. I'm doing 100cc.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if there's no desire to go do X30 in the first place, if there's no desire to move up,
well, some of it is,
that's a whole bigger issue.
Some of it is the first year we moved up with Jesus, I ran him in X30 at the club. And the only reason I did that was because the best junior driver at the time at Cal Speed was Frankie Mossman. And so I felt, even though we were going to race 5 or 10 other kids, we're going to race Frankie for X30 because that's going to challenge him. And we're going to go for track records and we're going to try to beat him. And that's it. The following year, we did all 100. And the reason I did that even at the national was we had I give respect to those guys winning at the national level, that my son's just not going to go over there and race with them. I need some time in him to develop in the X30, and we don't have anything out here for him to develop in. We only had the 100. And I think that comes from, like SCUSA, the KA class looks so great. Some of those guys shouldn't be in KA anymore. I mean, Jake Drew.
So kind of like what you were talking about the 206 earlier.
Yes.
There's almost like, and so
Jake Drew, Oliver Calvo.
So one of the things we have in our arrive and drive thing in our sprint series is there's actually an experience cap. Once you get to a certain level,
our goal, so many points or whatever.
Your gold license, you are not allowed to go run sprint anymore.
We had that in motocross too. If you won, any class you're in, so that in motocross,
you can
it's all
point
the
out,
same
right?
shit. There's big beginner, novice, intermediate, and pro. That's the structure across all platforms. If you win 3 beginner races, sorry, dude, you're a novice now. If you win 3 novice races, sorry, dude, you're an intermediate now. So, granted, that sport is thousands deep, which is where will always have, as much as this all sounds great and fine and dandy, is having these, I actually, myself, I don't think I should be racing KA, but
there's nothing else for you to race.
Well, I'm on a, I don't want to spend the fucking next 30 money. I just don't.
Sure.
Well, no, I do. I think that's 2 things. That's the biggest thing is what's the desire to move up to X30 if there's no one there?
There's no one there.
Whether junior, senior, whatever. But the other part too is, let's play the complete opposite for a second and let's be the organization. Why am I going to have a cap or start to do something that's going to hinder entries from a pro tour?
See, it has to be like an industry-wide thing.
100%.
Yeah.
But if there's 10 guys that shouldn't be there, but they're going to give me $1,000 each, I'm not going to turn down the 10 grand. Just like the team won't turn down the 10 grand.
That's the difficult part because he says the pro tour stuff is huge right now.
Yeah, that's the short
term. But they're not looking 2 to 3 years down the road. Where are these next X30 guys coming from?
Well, and I think the other tough part too is I don't know much about the motocross thing, but I know they do have the right program to keep people moving out of the class. But let's say Jesus, right? He wins three, or he wins the Pro Kart Championship. Perfect. He can't do KA anymore. How are you going to tell that person you have to buy an X30 when they barely, if they barely made a Pro Kart happen?
Yeah,
you know?
there's ways to do it. For instance, if you win a Pro Tour Championship in KA, you as a competitor already
should be wanting to go
I
to
will
the next
automatically
category.
look down on you if you just want to continue to cherry pick. Like if his kid continued to run KA Junior, I'd be like, what is Jesus doing for his son right now? Nothing.
Yeah, and then to put it on the other end of the age spectrum in Masters, I know, like for me, it rock. Like I started out running GP and 100cc at Challenge. We didn't have the GP that we. Let me rephrase. I didn't figure it out good enough, and so we weren't good enough. So we focused on 100cc. That's what we ran in Vegas. Given the opportunity to run 100cc Rock VLR versus a GP, I would run the VLR in a heartbeat because I hate the GP. I just hate the way it drives. Now, that being said, given the opportunity to run a 100cc or an X30, I'd like to do both because I like to do more racing. Now, if it was required of me to do one or the other, then I'm all for what you're saying, where there's that ladder system, because I think we can all agree, at least in the Masters division, they're at the top level stuff like Rock, Vegas, and Supernats. There are drivers, and even when I was running in the at Pro Kart, there was drivers that were in X30 that should have been in 100cc.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, and we're talking Masters, Grandmasters, if you will, they'd probably have way more fun. They're not going as fast, but probably have more fun, not as hard on the bodies, all this other kinds of crap. That they should run 100cc. There should be that ladder system to a certain extent.
Well, even if we take a small step back in time when we had Stars of Karting. Stars of Karting was it 4 classes? It was very small. It was 4 or 5 classes. And it was pro. Like, that was it. And it was, the European CIK stuff at the time. But, there wasn't a KA option. There was one junior class. It was JICA. There was one senior class, 2 senior classes, KZ, what is now KZ, and the single speed division, which was all pro. And then they had a pro, cadet class, which was Comer at the time. But there was, that was the pro series. That was like, I raced one time in that whole deal. And, again, I wasn't the most successful when I was young, but at the same time, my dad didn't push me to that point. We didn't spend the money and the time at that point when I wasn't at that level. But that was pro, and there was 5 classes. And that was it. That was like the shit in American karting. There was no KA class. There was no Micro Swift. There was no Masters. That didn't exist. This was pro United States karting. So we've also lost track of that. When we talk about KA, in my opinion, we all want to go to the Supernats. We all want to race Vegas. I get it.
Doesn't belong at the Supernats.
Sports change, but that shit doesn't belong there. Cadets, a Micro Swift class doesn't belong there. A Masters class, as much as, maybe there's another event, again, like the IKF Nationals, which was still a huge event. They had all the classes, kid karting up. But when you went to the quote unquote, if we want to call anything fucking pro, and we're there on Tuesday testing, you're not a pro. Because the second you move out of the carts into cars, you just did your kid a disservice by giving him 7 days of practice. That shit don't happen when you're pro, right? So that's how it worked. Stars was a 4-day deal, just like Jesus talked about earlier. The ideal event is 4 days for your money's worth on the track, for the event sustainability. But it was 5 classes. You got a shit ton of time on the racetrack, and it was only pro divisions.
My question is why did micro get added? I know why mini did, and actually we talked about that with Christian Brooks about there was like 4 minis, but it was a thing over in Europe, and so it ended up becoming a part of the game at Supernats originally. But how did micro become? Like, I disagree that there shouldn't be a Masters category.
Why? You're not pros?
That's just because you're.
I think
you guys aren't pros.
Listen,
old pros. However,
you're not pros.
However, I do agree.
Do you see vet races at a Supercross event? I don't.
I don't go to a Supercross event.
Well,
the micro was brought in. I was in the meeting. The micro is a great addition, like the KA, because if you have a veteran karter that's 12, some of these cadet kids are 13, a new kid coming into the sport, they're never going to compete. It's going to take them too long. If you get
if they go from micro to mini.
No, if you
they go
get,
mini
let's
to junior.
for example, if you get, if you have a 12 veteran cadet driver racing here locally, and you have a kid that starts karting at the age of 9 or 8, they're really not going to ever get to that point if you've had those kids racing kid kart all the way through. So
Agreed.
the micro is a great starting point. They don't have to go against those big dogs.
I was only referring to it being a super nats.
Yes. So we were, believe it or not, Tom, I was in the meeting with Tom, and I was in the meeting where they were voting on putting the micro in at like a Pro Tour national event, and it might have been even the super nets. I voted.
Well, at the time, it was included. It was the Pro Tour was part of the super nats all at the same time.
Correct.
So by default.
I had voted no on that because I felt that it shouldn't be at a pro event. They're little 7-year-olds, and it's
7 and 9, right?
keep
Is that what it is?
these and Tom actually voted no, and it was a lot of the other group that he had entrusted in that were like, yes.
Well, obviously, none of us know what we're talking about because that thing sells out every time. And I think that's, again, it goes
Yeah, but
right
it's
back
not. But it's
to
not
what you were
about
saying.
that. I think you would have a much better super nets race.
Well, and I think that's a whole nother part of the deal. We're talking about how long the weekend is, how draining the weekend is emotionally, otherwise, how long it is day-wise, how many classes there are versus the other stuff. It kind of, there's not like there's one issue or one easy fix. It's all intertwined because of the number of classes, because of what classes are included, what the thought process is, what the vibe is. Is it full pro? Is it a ladder pro? Is it the best of that category? So when we go back to the whole point of how we got going on this thing with the licensing and that whole thought process of being the best of the best and working your way up, one argument might be, hey, if you win this particular category, you can't go do it, like you had mentioned about KA versus X30, that kind of deal. And also to your question, Derek, about like, well, then how do you force somebody to do that? Well, maybe the champ gets the motor.
Yeah,
Maybe the champ gets the motor. Well, guess what? What's the excuse? Now it's the same chassis, so on and so forth. So I think at the end of the day, the question is on the short term side, is there anything that can be done locally, or would it really have to be top down to kind of change the mold?
For me, I hope a lot of parents come to me and they ask me. I personally have my own experience, so my son, I go, pay attention, look.
Yeah, the recipe's right here.
A lot of
It's that
them,
simple.
He's done it.
Yeah.
and the reality, I don't think Jesus is at his best, and I have him out in the US, we're so behind. I have him out here in an OK senior, and that thing is passing shifters out here. That thing is bad fast, and that's what the real deal go-karter race. If we put our US market on that class, it'd be, I don't know what we would see.
It'd be embarrassing, honestly.
It would be embarrassing because I know for a fact if I put Buddy J in an OK senior in a European race, we're not making the show, and that's sad. I mean, when we qualify pole at the Supernets by 0.3, and I'm like, that speed that thing's going and everything that's going on. I mean, he's doing a hell of a job. But I mean, I'm not all of a sudden going to pack our stuff up and go to Europe. And it's like, man, some of these guys, they're struggling in the K, and it's for those reasons. They shouldn't be there sometimes, and they'd be in karting longer.
Well, guys, I mean, we kind of talked on it earlier when I asked influences, right? And you a few of you guys made the note as social media can really be a push, especially nowadays, and I definitely agree with that. But why do we think a new guy that gets into the sport or a new family that brings their kid in the sport has such a big stick up their butt to what's the rush,
Well, here's what I think, and I'm not a parent like Jesus mentioned. He's actually the only one out of all of us that's got a kid, so he can speak to firsthand, experience. But in my opinion, especially like we mentioned, there's a lot more money floating around now. So that gives you the ability to have more freedom to do whatever it is, per se you want to do. I think all any parent probably wants is to give their kid the world, right? And all you want to do is make them happy. Now, obviously, like Jesus and others, they have to talk to themselves. They got to check themselves, pull the reins back a little bit. Some do and some don't. And for whatever reason they choose, I think ultimately it goes back to just wanting to give their kid as much as they possibly can, whether it be it's something that, they didn't have the ability or privilege to experience as a younger kid. But the other thing you have to take into consideration now is like when we raced, aside from maybe Jesus, but like when Race and I raced, we grew up racing with our parents. We come from more of a blue collar, background, if you will. And I think, so what you have there now compared to before is if mom and dad bring their kid to the racetrack, the majority of them have no previous life in racing itself. They couldn't tell you which way is up if they tried. So at that point, they put their trust in you, and then they have to walk that tightrope and find that balance of like, okay, I want to give my kid the world, but at the same time, I want to do it the right way. But when you don't really know how to begin with, that's probably what makes it all the more harder for a parent, in my opinion. I mean, all you want to do is, like I said, give them everything you can and get them to the top as soon as possible, because that's all anybody wants, right?
And I think that's where the ownership comes into the.
That's where it comes back to the race teams and the.
But as a
guys
parent,
like Jesus.
but that's trust me.
When you're emotionally involved,
Look,
all common sense goes out the window, right?
You go crazy. I have guys that have legitimate, successful businesses, and I ask them all the time, "Oh, how did you get there? Did you just get there from like, did you just start yesterday?" He's like, "No, it took years, and I had to do this and I had to do that." And I'm like,
weird.
look,
Right,
what are you
exactly.
trying to do with your son? And I always give this advice to my parents, to the parents, and I tell them, like, you're trying to go too fast too soon and take the steps. But eventually 3 years, they're like, this is too expensive. My kid's never going to win. They're cheating. I'm out of here.
Yeah, and I think
To cut in on that, like I even think from we're all, you and I are probably the only millennials in this room, right? Yeah. From that perspective, as being raised by some of these blue collar parents and people that had to build businesses and now I think the mentality in general has changed from the youth. Even kids I grew up with, I was raised very strict, blue collar. I had to work for everything that my dad ever gave me. Was, the deal was I'll match your effort, right? And that kind of has gone out the window. Little Timmy can give at 50%. You look at the data and you're like, dude, he goes into the corner 20 feet earlier, breaks 20 feet earlier than so-and-so. And he said it earlier, instant gratification is what everybody, it seems like, in the world right now is after. And it's not like a sport problem. It's kind of a overall problem. And that's just the reality of it. You just don't see it anymore. The hard work and dedication, and the few kids that are winning. When you look at the program that they put together, like, I'm fortunate enough to work with that John Antonino kid. And you guys just saw it. We were out here for 3 days straight, working our asses off to get better. That kid's willing to work at it. But then some of my other customers ask, well, why is that kid so much faster? I said, dude, we put in a lot of freaking work to do this. And there's a sense of instant gratification that everybody wants. They want to buy the faster engine. They think if they buy Jesus Jr.'s engine, they're going to pick up half a second automatically because they paid for it. They think if they pay Matt to tune the go-kart and coach the kid, that it's worth half a second. And at the end of the day, the data just never lies.
Yeah,
They want to lie.
They want to go the easy way out.
Path of least resistance.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. How do I get there?
I mean, that's human nature, right? It's
Yeah.
just now we have more tools and more information
More technology.
right here in our hands
Right.
to tell us everything we need to know. The answer's right here.
Well, I'll tell you what. Anyone that's paid Matt to go to, and they got a refund right after that because it didn't work out.
For sure.
Sorry, driver coach.
No, but one thing I actually feel like there is a real thing of is, do you guys think that there's a bigger split in the demographic right now? Like rich, let's just say rich and poor.
Yeah.
I feel like there's not much of a middle class out there as
There's
much
not
as
a
it used to
blue
be.
collar community anymore.
No, it's all high end. Bougie.
What do you think, Jesus? You come across a lot of people.
He's blue collar. His kid's going through it.
No, for sure. I think you come across more people though than maybe either of them, just because of the amount of business that you do.
What does that
Different-
mean?
different
Do I not
types of
sell
business.
as many engine or go karts?
I don't think you're going to sell as many engines.
You're
I don't
right.
think so.
I don't.
No, there's not a whole lot. I mean, these guys, even some of the guys, I don't know where they get their money from, but I mean, some of these guys some of you only know by the cars they're driving, or it's like they spend a lot of money.
Well, and honestly, we look at the price tag of a Rive and Drive, and just for a quick comparison, you could do an entire season of Super Series, the top level arrive and drive that there is, for $13.50
For the year?
For the year,
Oh, wow.
$13.50.
How many races do we get for that over here at Cal Speed Karting Facility?
Will Matthew Johnson from Seth Network, you get it's 10 rounds. It's 1 round per month. It's
10 rounds for 1,300 American?
10 rounds for the year. Yeah. My point being is that I'll get somebody who's been in the
That's it,
sport,
Tom. I quit.
and they do pretty good at the Super Series at Arrive and Drive. And there's like the next level would be 206. Well, that bump, and 206, as we all know, that is the next level of learning.
Sure.
But the price tag for 206 versus the price tag for $13.50 to do the entire Arrive and Drive season, that little bump there, and then you try to go 100cc after
What does that tell you, Mike?
Exactly
You
that.
need to raise your prices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we don't. We're cutting that out.
Close that gap a little bit.
Now, and we know it though, right? Because we've seen it from 206 to 100cc. That's a big bump.
1,300
as well.
for the whole season. I spent like 1,300.
But that's
on
what I
one
don't
stupid
understand.
race for 12 hours.
Listen.
What the hell's going on around here?
Listen, go-karting, it's expensive. It's an expensive sport, okay? But there are definitely ways. I have done it with Jesus up until this last year.
Ultimately, as privateers. Sorry.
Pretty cheap.
Yeah.
You know, we found ways to, you know, get some help. I mean, those are some of the things I told them very early on. I said, the only way you're going to continue to go-kart is by getting some sponsors. Someone's going to help you with the chassis. Obviously, we're going to help you with the engines, but and the only and so then that's the thing. And so how do you get there? Well, you have to be good enough to where someone's going to want to put you on a cart.
Well,
And
so
that's it.
So a few things. I mean, it's two things. Like, I think it sucks because at one point when we're all doing 206, like it kind of, like Jesus' point earlier, it kind of took away from the little guy trying to get into the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you think about 100cc now, like it's air cooled, and that was pretty much how karting started, right? All air cooled stuff. Do we think that the out of the pickup stuff is now just gone too far to the other end? Well, it has gone too far to the other end, but it sucks now that even 206 to an extent, 100cc, the guy entering is going to go get his ass kicked because of how prestige that those classes have turned into at some spots.
Depends. Like, so for instance, like you come to an LAKC or a Tri-C event here, and that guy out of his pickup truck that's working with his dad, maybe a mechanic or a coach or, you know, one maybe outside person helping the program, can still go succeed. We see it back east. This kid named Ian Quinn, him and his pops, they kill it. They do a good job. So is that lost? No, it's up to you as the participant to take interest in your own motors, your own racing. None of these kids or parents take interest. They pay a Nash, they pay a Jesus, they pay a me, they pay a somebody like that, and just say, do it.
It's what Matt said, path of least resistance.
Right,
It's going to be
for sure.
so much easier to have somebody, and again, like you'd mentioned, I think it was you, Jesus, like, or they don't know which way is up, right? It's brand new. I don't know which way is going on. So I'll go to somebody who does. It's so much easier to do that, and I think there's not a lot, or it's a little bit more challenging to go, here, let me teach you how to do this for a team, because the team still got to do team things.
Right.
You know, to go there and try to learn as a parent or what have you, and try to get those immediate results. It's going to be a little bit challenging.
Well, that's why I said earlier, I hate hearing karting is super expensive, because it's not, dude. I've raced everything you can race in a car, cart, whatever. At motocross, whatever. Maybe motocross is a little cheaper because it's like 90% rider, 10% equipment.
It was only 2 tires also.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, it's just different, right? So we can't even. But for car racing or automotive racing, karting is the cheapest form of motorsports. And, you know, what makes it expensive is when you call Matt for his service, when you call me for my service, when you call him for his service, right? So that's what makes it expensive. When you don't do the homework and you don't take the time to invest in it is what makes this sport expensive. You can absolutely do it on your own, but people choose not to. So when it just really irks when people say this sport's expensive.
When I say
really
it's
not.
expensive,
You mean at that level we all compete at?
I mean, well, listen. I mean, you got to buy a $10,000 go kart and every entry and tires. Just the base price for somebody. You know, we grew up on 25 to 30 grand a year, so we didn't have $1,000 to spend on
Yeah,
riding around a
alone
go-kart
fish.
Yeah,
track.
you watch
So
what
it's-
you even ate at night,
So
right?
it's an expensive sport in that sense, but I mean, once you're in, yes, there's things like that you can control and teach your kids. That's why, again, if there was some sort of system that allowed, it would keep guys longer, because if you're in KA and you say, I want to go run Pro Tour, you got to be careful, because if you run X amount of Pro Tour races, you can't come back over here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's either going to keep that driver a little longer to maybe get a little better, because if they go over here and get their ass handed and then it's like, I can't come back, maybe they stay here a little longer, right? And then when they're ready to make the move, they're ready to make the move. Certain things like that would help. I mean, how do you do it? I don't know. I just come up with the great ideas. But
It's all going to happen right here after this publishes.
how do you do it? I mean, because I watch like a kid like Oliver Calvo that is a blue collar, and sometimes I saw them go to events that they really weren't ready or they shouldn't be going to, and that going to 2 or 3 pro tours pretty much takes our budget to run a good pro kart and club budget. So it's like, man, you're throwing all your money over here because we're really not ready.
Never mind the train going through the
Don't worry
podcast
about
right now, guys.
But it's like, he maybe if there was something to keep him back a little longer, or make him decide that, because then what happens is Oliver goes to a pro tour, doesn't do so good. Guess what? They still squeeze every dollar to come race a pro kart when they shouldn't do that. And it's like, I see it happen all the time. And it's like, next thing you know, it's like they're strung out and they're like, we got to take a couple months off. We got to take the year off. This has gotten out of hand.
And that's the worst thing that can happen in this sport, is anybody taking a couple months off, a couple of years off.
It's
if
over.
You just knew where you can fall in place.
He should have never, if he never had the chance to go back and race 206, we wouldn't have wasted that budget. He would have stayed in his lane.
It's kind of living beyond your means a little
Sure,
bit.
sure. And it happens because you get in la la land, and for some parents it doesn't matter. They got millions. They're gonna race whatever. Okay, but now it becomes, keep them, let them learn. I mean, I said it in my podcast. You can't just go from this math class to this one if I have $20,000. Like, no, you have to pass these, no matter who you are.
Right.
And if you pass them with a B or a A, you're going to be better by the time you get here. And the guys going from here to here, they're never going to figure it out. And they quit, they stop, they complain,
You know what the hardest part is
all these
on
things
moving
become
forward?
a problem.
The hardest part on moving forward with this idea and fixing it is the problem's not just here. It's all the way to the top. Because if I wanted to enter you in an ARCA race tomorrow, no
We can do
problem. Sign up, mate.
I'd have my faith in him.
But
What
I'm just
about a
saying,
cup race? Can we sign them up at a cup race?
Cup's a little different.
Cup, you
but
got to get if it's at Martinsville.
There's a bunch
maybe.
of hacks that
I mean, and
anyway.
obviously
You gotta
now
do
with
ARCA.
all the however many teams are allowed to have it, it's
Yeah,
obviously different. But
it's become motorsports in general because the population of motorsports enthusiasts, participants.
I mean, dude,
has
you got
dwindled.
14-year-olds running late models, and even when I ran the late model in 2017, I had 3 or 4 of those guys to deal with. Now it's the other way around. Like when my dad first started, it was same thing, blue collar guys, dudes that own their own construction companies, or maybe they were superintendents for
Well, and it was 16 and up. NASCAR
or
made
whatever,
it
and it was
16
16 and up. Heck, it was 18
At
to
one
be in
point,
the pits at one
yeah,
point.
at
I
one
think
point.
you had to be 18 and.
Yeah, when I was a kid. Yeah.
But now, the majority of your late model drivers are 14 and 15 years old.
And actually, to kind of put a point on that and segue to maybe the last thing I want to ask you guys is actually something, Maddie, was in your Instagram, your Instagram story that you had posted. It was about fighting and about a race director basically giving the old hat tip. Yes, sir, you may.
You can only fight on the front stretch or something. It said,
yeah,
right at the
That
Chili
was
Bowl.
a Chili Bowl. He
Chili
said
Bowl.
in the driver's meeting, he said, if you fight on my ramp all the way up to your pit, or basically when you exit the racetrack and you want to pick a fight from there to your pit, you're out. If you want to fight, do it on my front stretch where the fans can see it.
So,
I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch, obviously, but go ahead with the rest of your question.
well, yeah, my question is, because I'm 100%, again, different end of the spectrum, but I'm 100% against any of that BS. I think you can get the job done out on course And a lot of you guys back in the day, you could do it creatively enough to where no one's getting hurt. Or any
All
other
my
kinds
years of
crap.
duking it out on the racetrack, I don't think I've ever really been in a real fight after a race.
And I don't think I personally don't ever, I have a zero tolerance personally for retaliation and for any of that kinds of stuff. That's also the way I was brought up. You know, Mark Martin status, I'm never going to dump you. I'll get dumped all day, but I won't dump you back. So I'm on this end of the spectrum. When it comes to just straight up fisticuffs, because you guys can't get your shit figured out on course, I also have a zero tolerance on that thing. I don't think that's okay as well. It really strikes me as odd that not only is it allowed, but praised at the highest level. And I think that's part of the problem. And then you also look at the Chili Bowl. We have a race director that says, absolutely, I'd actually prefer that you guys fight a little bit because it'd be good for ratings.
Well, at the end of the
I
day,
don't think-
it's different. That's entertainment.
I don't think he's even.
But that's my problem.
I don't think
right
he's
there.
even pushing the fight. To be honest with you,
The point
because
is
most guys don't
he's
got
saying
the
it's
stones
okay.
to pull out on the front stretch and fight it out right there on the track. Most guys, let's be real,
Maybe
don't-
that's why he said it.
And
most
maybe.
guys exactly, and most guys really truly don't want to fight. Okay, so let's just clear that part up real quick.
I always tell Jesus the guys that scared me the most is the guys that don't say anything.
Yeah,
So
That's why
I'm not
Lil
one
Junior,
that-
I'm way more comfortable around nowadays because he's been talking a lot more. So
I
I'm
don't-
actually,
I don't
like
ad-
him a lot.
I
I was
don't-
scared for a while.
I don't
right.
advocate fighting in the pits after the race. I think it can be handled on the track, like you said.
I was in a race with Ron Charteau one time at Adams, and that was my home track. And this was an old timer, you know, Ron. He's out there beating me up. I mean, we're banging wheels. We're gonna come off the track and we're gonna fight. Like this is gonna be a fight. I'm looking around. Where's Troy? Where's my guys? Because he was booting me off. I'd come back, boot him off. He beat me, and I come off the track. We're gonna fight. And he took his helmet off. He had the biggest grin on his face. He had the time of his life, and that scared the shit out of me. And I'll never forget that.
There you go.
That scared the shit out of me, and I was like, okay.
That's
Yeah.
how this guy's wired.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just kind of taught me like, all right, sometimes, when people come off the track hot, and I was a little scared, to be honest. And so the
Right.
fighting's never been.
And especially, we could talk about like, okay, it's entertainment
After
and
that.
different stuff like that. But at the end of the day, especially when we're talking about a senior group that has such a mixture, it's not fair to the elder folk
No.
at all that it's a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
Because of the way things are handled in that particular class, because you have a scenario, and this is why I have a zero tolerance across the board.
Yeah,
Because-
half are minors.
Because there's exactly
Oh man, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and at the end of my rope in senior, I found myself starting to ask a lot more often, "Hey, are you 18?"
Yeah,
Because sometimes you want to punch him in the face. Now, like I said, we've all felt that way.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that
Yeah.
I don't think I condone it.
I'm not saying that I
mean,
never felt like I was
I'm
angry.
cool.
like-
I'm cool with fighting, and I fought a lot when I was a kid. I have a brother that's less than 2 years younger than me. So I'm down to fight, but I don't promote it. I don't condone it for racing. I don't think this is the place for that. And really, especially obviously now that I'm older and a little more calm and wise, I don't resort to fighting. I try to do everything I can to talk my way out of one, but I don't know. At the highest level, you go to a NASCAR race, two guys wreck on the last lap on the front straight, and they want to slap each other in the helmets a couple times and look like jackasses, and the fans go crazy.
it's
Then
gonna go viral.
yeah,
That's
Yeah,
my
whatever.
favorite part.
Me and
Punch
Matt's
him with
little
the helmet
fight's
on.
not gonna go viral.
No,
No.
but also I don't think it should be penalized. It
Yeah.
should be a scenario where there is a repercussion. It should not be a thing on especially in my opinion when we're in an event where there's all different types of drivers,
Yeah,
ages, etc. It's not it's a hard zero for me.
going back to being getting with the times and with the fact that we just all agreed and acknowledged that there's a lot more youth in the sport. Yeah, it becomes too difficult to manage. And for a short bit, is it fun to watch from the other side of the fence? Yeah, sure, but I'm not against.
Not only that, I mean,
I'm not
nowadays-
against being penalized for fighting either, because there's really no time and place for it at the racetrack, to be honest.
Yeah,
Now, if you want to go fight after the race outside the gate,
See, that's what
Fair
I'm saying.
game.
The Chili Bowl guy was completely wrong. It should be happening over there, not on the
he's
track.
taking
He's
it
selling
outside.
tickets. There's a very big difference. So
Yeah.
when you compare cup races, Chili Bowl to what we do, we're trying to groom. Again, this is the thing that keeps me in this form of motorsports. I can go run a Trans Am team, or I can go run some other team and do what I want to do. But what brings me back to this sport is the life lessons and the core values that I learned in this sport from a young age. I was raised here. I was raised at the racetrack, and I've learned basically any value I ever had in life from here at the racetrack. And that's, to me, the most important piece of racing is the life lessons and the core values that these kids get to learn at such a young age. They get so much further ahead than society being at the racetrack. So going back to fighting, that's all entertainment. What they do at the cup races or Chili Bowl, that's purely to sell tickets in the stands.
Right.
Is it right or wrong? No, it's wrong. But at the end of the day, if you're going to point the finger and figure out okay, is this worth throwing blows at? My rule of thumb has always been, is second I cross over the scales and you want to come talk to me about something, you lost your opportunity, dude. You either do it on the racetrack or in the scale line. We can talk about it there, or you do not walk in my pit, because at that point you're entering the danger zone and we're done at that point if you're coming in hot, right? So, but again, I don't condone, Matt, I'm in the same...
I tell guys, let's rewind it so I can change. It's it's over, man.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? Even
over.
So, you want to fight about it? Then what?
Yeah,
That's not going to change what happened.
What's the resolution? You still got wrecked or whatever you were upset about. But at the same time, if you want to talk about getting down to blows, a lot of that, I think, again, falls back on the penalty structure, the series, the officiating, right? Because there has been points in my life where I've gone, the same person, the same instance, the same thing keeps happening.
Yeah.
More or less the instance where, a guy wrecks me, I wreck him the next race, and it keeps freaking going. And you're at the point where dude, what do I got to do? Shut this dude's lights off?
I think
You got to
that-
learn how to wreck them better.
Well, do I have to hospitalize somebody on the racetrack?
And I think
Is that what it
that-
comes down to?
And that's what it is, right? I think that when it really comes, especially I would argue the younger group, you're trying to get respect. I'm obviously not being respected out on course, so they feel like they're pushed to that other end of the spectrum.
And there's a sense of human nature that eventually comes into play, right?
I'm not
When
gonna
you're in
get
that
bullied.
situation when you come off the scale and you pull the helmet off and you're just raging with fire, right? It's gonna happen. It's human nature. We're all competitive, and it's passion at the end of the day coming out if something like that happens. But a good example is one of the Morgan brothers this last weekend gets ejected from an event for. I saw it. Somebody's had a video of it, and I saw it, and he literally just brushed the guy's shoulder, and gone, done from the event, done. Out.
I didn't see it. How much of a brush was it?
Dude, it was literally something I would do to you as friends, right? We're obviously
like a shoulder shove?
hey, dude, what the hell?
Hey,
nothing crazy.
On the stream at Supernats, there was a friggin' I think it was open-handed, but it was a hit on the helmet.
They call that a bitch slap. But you're talking about Zillage, right?
Yeah, but you can't brush the shoulder.
Right.
Wasn't
so,
Zillage the one? Wasn't Morgan who got slapped?
Yeah, right.
And then he got booted. The next race. Terrible.
Yeah, but
Put
to
him
put
right
that
in
in
the fence.
perspective, a kid went out there and used, there was an instance at a circle track when I was racing at Orange Show Speedway. A guy went out there and just flat out T-boned a dude and just ruined his race car, put the guy in the hospital, whatever. The guy got assault for a deadly weapon with a deadly weapon charges for using his race car as a deadly weapon. So to put it in perspective, if you go over there and you brush somebody's shoulder and shove them, let's call it a shove, right? Even a hard shove, you're not causing any damage, you're not hurting anybody, right? And you're in that moment where you're aggravated. And
Just emotionally.
Something happened, right? Not something maybe you would have done if you were in the right state of mind, but you do that, you shove a guy, but that guy goes out there and puts you in the hospital and gets a pushback. Well, he got a 5-position penalty and you got thrown out for shoving a dude. Right? There's got to be some sort of middle ground where this makes sense.
Goes back to the rules,
right?
How they're enforced and what the penalties are.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
You can in any series, honestly, the only fights I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, and I've only been in one fight in karting, and it is embarrassing to say, but it was at a 206 race.
Of course it was.
Oh yeah,
Right.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was here, actually.
I remember pointing and laughing and walking by. I was like, I finished fourth, and I don't have to deal with
Keebler was trying to get me to fight him when I took him
idiots
out in
and
that
scams.
206 race. He was trying everything he could in the book to taunt me.
$100.
Yeah, right.
Damn right.
But to that point, like if a series or a race is getting to blows where people are actually, at that point punching each other or getting physical with one another, you got to look back as a series and go,
sure.
okay, what did we miss here?
The only thing I'd say on Morgan is I don't know if he was on probation already. Maybe
He might have been.
because he got an altercation in Utah.
Right. But when I tell you, like, the shove was like, it wasn't even, the word shove is like over exaggerating.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah,
hey,
I
bro,
didn't see it.
what the hell kind of thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't a, even like a two hands, I'm trying
I
to
think you
push you
just
over
need to
your
let him
cart
go.
kind of thing.
Right. We've all seen way worse.
Right.
Of like. just-
Right.
But you know what else too? The right way to handle that, honestly, like if you and me were to get into it on track and I finished 10 spots back, I probably wouldn't come talk to you at the scale, but I might come find you at your pit
Right.
10, 15 minutes later. I wouldn't come in hot, but I'd come over to talk about it. And if we can get there with these younger guys, and they do have these occasional opportunities to sort it out man to man in a calm fashion, I think, that just goes back to checking the box of another life lesson. Because
100%.
again, you're learning to deal with people.
And
Well,
then
dude,
going
we-
back to like what causes that, like, okay, let's look at the parents. Like, how are we raising these
Well,
children? Are
not
we
the
raising
parents,
them
but also the racing. So now you
Right.
guys, these two individuals, for instance, that we just used as an example, are now responsible for their on and off track actions and how they're going to deal with each other. I mean, I had rivals, and after a handful of races, whether they went for better or for worse, you almost have to come to a point where you got to pull the guy off to the side and say, "Hey, look, we run against each other every single weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no good ending here. Let's
Well,
put this shit off
and
to
all
the
the,
side
uh,
and carry on."
all the drivers meetings I do for like the arrive and drive stuff, I'm like, it's all brand new people or whatever, or people haven't been in that long or really long. But I'm like, we all know there's a right way and a wrong way to talk to a person. If you have an issue with someone, I'm like, don't go talk to them right away.
Yeah,
like,
give it a
go
minute.
show
Shut the mic.
yeah.
Well, maybe watch the GoPro
I'm like,
footage,
go
do
yell-
something,
go
right?
yell,
Figure
Mike.
it out. Why did this happen? What caused this? Usually if I ever feel like I get dumped 9 times out of 10, I probably deserved it.
Well, well, and the other thing too is I'm like I had a few moments this year, like in senior, and granted, I'm just like you, Race. I'm on the elder side of the senior category, but I was like, I'll talk some shit in the scales line. I'm like, hey, that was like, whatever. That was a pretty shitty drive you just had to get by me or whatever.
No. You say I didn't race you like that. Right.
That's the
That's
way.
Yeah.
good.
I've never
Well,
raced you
I've
like
never
that.
raced you
Well,
like that.
Well, that's what'll.
That's all you got to say. And
Well, that's
Matt,
what,
if you.
well, now
yeah.
I know from
Yeah.
Louis. Now I know from Louis, but no, I'll follow it up. Be like, you didn't see me do that too, or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, too, I think what helps with my age too, and you guys would probably agree, is how much is that shit worth it to get fired up about?
Well, that comes with age,
Well,
like
it's
you
not
said.
because
but-
it happens every weekend, right?
Exactly.
Like, it can happen every
It's like,
weekend.
and I think you can definitely talk some shit in the scales line, get it out of your system for a second, but you just say that to get the initial burst out, and then you can cool your jets a little bit. You know what I mean? But to go and have the altercation, it would have to be some serious shit for me to go up and throw blows, I guess.
The truth,
Especially when the entire friggin' field is younger than you anyway.
the truth, and
their necks.
Yeah, you can't punch
And
70%
with
of them.
Jesus, he always says the truth will set you free, and more times than not, you'll get it from this guy. The truth, the right way to deal with it is just to be quiet.
Yep.
Some of the scariest guys are the quiet ones.
I told you.
Girls too.
Yep. Always.
But the truth, the best thing you
Give
can do
us
is
the
just be
truth.
quiet.
Give us the truth.
The truth.
Finally.
My
the
dad
truth.
always told me that, if anything happens on track, 'cause I used to get pretty fired up when I was younger in the scale line, off the track, whatever, and just get freaking angry because I was just, honestly, it was just passion driven and it would just see red and lose sight of it. But for my whole life, he always just told me, he's like, you know what, if you got a problem, deal with it on the racetrack. Shut up. We'll come back. We'll look at it. We'll figure out why, whatever. And then go back there and deal with it. And so, being silent and not saying anything, if anything, coming off the track with a smile on your face after you just had the gnarliest, worst, craziest battle of your life. And that guy's probably thinking about different ways to kill you. And the guy's just smiling at you and saying nothing. Like,
No, he came off
That's
and
the
said,
scariest
gave
part.
me a hug and was like, that was so much fun. And I'm like shaking. And I'm like, this guy's crazy. Because that kind of racing was really, we were really,
It was scary.
Yeah.
it was just we've done that. Me and Troy had done that of just knocking each other off and stuff. But this is some dude I didn't even know at
Yeah.
the time. And I'm like, what's he? And then he was just like, yeah.
That was great racing. Well, and I think that's just it, is that if you put yourself in those positions and you can learn from, you come from the other side of it,
Yeah.
really, we've been talking about it here towards the tail end of this thing about life lessons and growing up, and I mean, I think we can all agree the time that we've spent in karting and the time we spent in racing has made us who we are. Like you said, you grew up and
Absolutely.
done all this. We wouldn't be who we are if it wasn't for this sport and for the people that we've met in and stuff like that. And to put a point on it, guys, I think I speak for both Derek and I. This has been a hell of a lot of fun. This is our first roundtable here, and getting a chance to chat with the three of you guys and the vat of knowledge you have. And we got to do this again with a lot more topics and a lot more different things. And hopefully,
we got to set up like time.
We put this.
We literally didn't talk about the one topic I text Derek about. He was like, "Yeah, dude, we should base the show around that."
So, anyways, like I was saying,
I actually really enjoyed the conversation we all got to have this evening. And, if there's one thing to cap it all off with, we talked about the expense of karting. We talked about, even to cap it all off with this last segment, we talked about the violence in karting, potentially, right? Off the track, on the track, whatever. At the end of the day, for anybody like listening to this that maybe either is new to karting or think about getting into competition karting, it's at the end of the day, no, it's not that expensive if you want to take matters in your own hands and learn for yourself. It's not violent. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, everybody, for the most part, again, Maddie J and I have literally wrecked each other and gone off the track and hugged each other, like told each other we love each other. And there's a community here. People all care about each other. We're just all happen to be passionate, which also drives the cost of the sport up.
Sure.
And also drives the emotions of the sport up. So, for anybody, out there, as much as you could take bad from this, there's so much good in it, and just wants for improvement for the sport from all of us from this different side of the community.
absolutely.
Talk to the guys that have been in it for more than 10 years.
Yep.
Talk to those guys, ask them questions. If there's any karting company out there that's been here longer than 10 or 15 years, they're doing something right. They have some knowledge. We all have different ways of going out and winning. He's got different ways of winning. I have different ways of winning. Matt and I have different ways of winning, but he's got it. We all have the same experience, and it's like,
And the passion.
They're going to point you in the right direction. If a 20-year-old guy that's been in 20, I'm here because I love it. He's here because he loves it. And we're going to point you because we want you to enjoy it like we did.
Yeah.
And,
For sure.
I do that all the time. I mean, guys call me and I tell them the truth. You go down that path, it's going to cost you this much. And it's just unfortunate that nowadays a lot of them go down that path. And I'm like, here you go. And then there's nothing to hold them back. And that's my disappointment. It's just like, man, stay.
Well, I think
Don't be in a rush to go to the Supernets. Don't be in a rush. Make that a 5-year goal. Make that a 6-year goal.
Enjoy the experience.
Make a plan and trust the process.
And don't be scared. I tell my parents, like, hey, if your kid can't win a LAKC or Tri-C race, really consider going to a pro kart, and so on and so on and so on. Like, it doesn't have to be nailed in, but like.
Well, and like Matt had mentioned when in his podcast, he was talking about, and you mentioned earlier, that's the recipe. Like having that recipe for having to build, how do I work my way up, or how do I, well, this is how you do it. The information you guys have been putting out there all night here, that's it.
Yeah. Talk to someone like Jesus said that's been around for more than 10 years, and chances are they'll have a recipe for you.
And I hope you listen to that, because so many people, I mean, we all probably get calls.
They don't listen.
Yeah.
They don't listen because there's no structure.
It's like there's some rush to a racing career.
It's like, don't.
We have the smallest little race. What's the smallest race that just happened?
Chill challenge.
Yeah.
I had 4 engine rentals. They're renting my Supernats engines.
Jeez.
And they're paying for them. And I'm like, you can,
Actually, to put to his point on that, so was it a Saturday race?
Mm-hmm.
Friday night, I'm sitting at Antoniano's shop in Bakersfield, and we're going, well, we have a junior header, and we have this K that's got 10 hours on it. Let's go race. Let's just go show up and race.
Yeah.
We have no clue what we've got, but we know we have a decently talented driver, and we're trying to learn here, right? He's just, he's a good mini driver. He's learning in junior now. I said, let's go race. I don't give a crap how many hours the engine. I don't care if it's 2 horsepower down. It's not going to do us any good, because if we go win that race, it's because we had the best driver in the seat.
Right.
Not because we rented the Supernats winning engine at the end of the day, because we're going to a local winter
the smallest
fun race.
Yeah.
So stay in your lane. Patience is a virtue. And
there's nothing wrong with practice days.
Absolutely
there's
not.
There's nothing wrong with getting seat time and building yourself
absolutely
up.
Absolutely not. I have a customer that just went and ran the first Florida deal without me for the first time. And he goes, man, we got our teeth kicked in, but we're going to come back and do it again. I go, how about you save the $7,000 you just spent and let's go travel the East Coast.
There's nothing to control them.
Yeah.
Right. Go travel the East Coast and test at new tracks. Get your kid to learn what this corner at this racetrack does and blah, blah, blah. Let's build some experience. Let's go have fun at a regional next year.
For years, I mean, like with Jesus, my son, I mean, you don't want to overdo it, but I mean, for a lot of his core years, we were at the track at least once a week.
Yeah,
I mean, we've been here, I think 3 Sundays in a row, or this will be the 3rd Sunday, and that's a sacrifice. It's my Sunday off, it's his Sunday off, it's my wife's Sunday off, and we sacrifice and come out here, and it's like I know what's coming. If we want to go win, we have to put in the time, and
yeah, there's a reason that guys like LeBron James still take 500, 1,000 shots a day.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, stay after it.
Mike and I get calls all the time, or people talk to us all the time. They'll do one rental session, like, hey, how do I get in this? I'm like, just do a season in Reynolds.
And for example, that doesn't cost. It costs us $80.
Yeah,
we use an old set of tires. I have old tires from the previous races I've kept that many people don't. I come home with 10 plus other people's tires, and we use them. We come out here. It costs us $80.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say too. If you go get your other cart, I'm like, you don't have to spend an arm and a leg. I'm like, yeah, there's a startup. You buy the go-kart, you buy the motor, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you can come out here and run for cheap, man. You can even run pump gas. You're not racing. Just make it cheap. And at the end of the day, whether you're racing or not, whether you're winning or losing, you're out here driving a go-kart. You're having fun.
That's right.
And what we all said earlier was it's supposed to be fun, right? So
it's only fun if you win.
Well,
damn it, Matt.
Matt had no fun this year. Matt had no fun.
No fun. Zero fun, sir.
Matt hasn't been having fun in a while.
Yeah.
I was going to say, neither have I then.
Yeah, same.
Guys, thanks again. Thanks so much for this.
Thanks for having us.
This has been absolutely awesome. We really appreciate you guys.
Absolutely.
You got it,
Thank you.
man.